Good evening, and welcome to AMTV. And now, the complete series of the AMTV DVD Collection. Kicking things off, we have 4321, which is a 2010 film, like, London gangs and stuff, very in the vein of the Hood trilogy, if you like. You've got 7 Days, which is a very bizarre foreign horror film. It's quite messed up, not for the faint of heart, certainly. You've got 10 Rillington Place, which is a really great film with a great cast, Richard Attenborough, John Hurt, amongst others. Really cool film. This DVD was actually quite hard to find. It might be a couple of quid more than you expect. I wonder if it's on Blu-ray actually, but yeah, highly recommend watching that. You've got 12 Angry Men, probably one of the greatest films of all time, just for like its pacing, its characters. It's a really great movie. There's stage versions as well. If you haven't seen 12 Angry Men, you're doing yourself a disservice. You definitely need to see that one. You got 127 Hours, Danny Boyle film. I love Danny Boyle's work. I think he's a brilliant director, and this film is no exception to that. One of James Franco's best delivered roles, in my opinion. You've got 1917, which is a more recent film. Now, war films, I do enjoy a war movie. They're always grand in scale. Now, this was done by Sam Mendes, who directed James Bond, Skyfall, and Spectre, amongst others. This was an absolutely beautiful film to watch. Highly recommend you watch that. You've got 2012. Now, this is actually a DVD steelbook. A lot of people think steelbooks are just limited to Blu-ray. Surprisingly, they also release them on DVD as well. So that is of the film 2012, which ironically came out in 2009. I have a big guilty pleasure for this film. Yes, it's daft and a bit stupid, but at the time, it was quite good. For some reason, I own the London 2012 Olympic Games box set here from the BBC. Now, this is the opening ceremony, the closing ceremony, and a bunch of highlights. This must have been like £2 with any purchase at HMV or something, because I don't know why I would have this otherwise. But, as a piece of history, it's neat to have. Now, this one was a good find. This is the Aardman Classics collection. Now, I got this from a car boot sale during lockdown, actually. It was only 50p. But this is a great little set. It's got so many of the Aardman shorts on here. So it's not got the full things like, the Wallace and Gromit shorts, but everything they made, like commercials or little stories. There's a big old book in here. It's a really great set. So if you can find this, I'd highly recommend you pick that one up. Next, we have this, the Acid House. Now, this is a massively trippy film. This is based on the works of Irving Welsh, who, of course, is famous for doing Trainspotting, amongst other things. So if you like Trainspotting, you'll really like the Acid House. There's a lot of familiar names in there. Ewan Bremer is in this. Martin Clunes, Gemma Redgrave, Michelle Gomez also makes an appearance. So really wacky film. If you like Trainspotting, you'll like the Acid House. Now, this one's always interesting. This is Adult Life Skills, starring, as you can see, Jodie Whittaker, who is the 13th Doctor, of course. Now, this came out in 2016 and is a surprisingly good film. I'd highly actually recommend people check this out. It's an independent film. It's very funny. It's very niche, but I think it really shows off Jodie as an actress. Next, you have Adventures in Babysitting, which is a late 80s film. I love sort of late 80s, like romps or comedies, like family adventures, and this is no exception to that. I really love this movie. It's got a special place in my heart. And then this one, Aftermath, this has Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is a more recent role for him. And again, I don't get why people discredit Arnie as a bad actor. I really don't think he is, and this film really shows off his acting chops amongst some others he's done. So yeah, if you like Arnie and you want to see him act, like really act, then definitely check out Aftermath. And then you've got Air Force One with Harrison Ford. This is a classic film from the late 90s where Harrison Ford plays the president. It's all set on the presidential airplane. Really fun adventure. Really very 90s, but very fun nonetheless. Then you have Alien vs. Ninja, which was, again, a foreign film. Very wacky, very big action. This is about 2010. It's very bizarre, but I highly recommend it if you're into that sort of thing, the bizarre stuff. Then we've got the Alien quadrilogy. Now, I know it's not all the Alien films, but this was given to me at a time when only the 4 existed. So that's Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection. I've only actually ever seen Alien. I haven't got around to the other 3, but I will eventually, one day. It's sat on my shelf long enough. American Graffiti. This is George Lucas's big film before Star Wars, and is surprisingly a very good film all these years later. I actually highly recommend this one. Lots of great use of music, of 60s culture, early 60s culture. It's a really fun film. There was a sequel. I haven't seen it, but apparently it's not very good. It also has a young Ron Howard, of course, went on to direct many great films in it as well. And here you have Amy, which is the documentary on Amy Winehouse, who of course tragically passed at the age of 27. If you don't know much about Amy Winehouse as a person, I'd recommend watching this because it's so so tragic what happened to it, and it is very powerful. So yeah, definitely recommend Amy. Then you have Another Hood. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, you know those films that are like London Gangs and Street Talk and stuff, like the Hood trilogy? This is a massive pastiche of that, but I find this really funny. It's certainly not for everyone. There are some people who will not like this film, but for me at the time when it came out, I was about 15, I loved this, and it's still got like a special place to me. Now we have this, Apollo 13, definitely one of the best films of the 90s, and there you go, a Ron Howard film. This tells the story of the Apollo 13 space mission, which of course went horribly wrong, and I won't reveal any more for anyone who doesn't know it, but if you haven't seen Apollo 13, please, please, please go and watch it. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. Then you have Arrival. Now, this got a lot of mixed reception. I actually really liked Arrival. It's got a strong cast. You've got Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner and Forrest Whitaker. It's a very slow-paced film, so you've got to give it some time, but I really, really like this one, and I think some of you guys will too, if you give it the chance, of course. Then you have Assault on Precinct 13, which is a John Carpenter film. Really cool film from the late 70s. I know they've remade it, but stick with the original. Really, really cool. Attack the Block. Now this has Jodie Whittaker in it again, but it also has John Boyega, who of course then went on to be Finn in Star Wars. This is a really cool film. It was about 2011, I think this came out, and I really enjoyed it. It's very quirky, aliens on that whole London street gang stuff. I really like the London street gang stuff, as you can tell. Now you have Avatar. This is the extended collector's edition. There's 3 discs on DVD, and of course still this is the... No, actually, it's not highest grossing, is it? Is Endgame the highest grossing? This was the highest grossing film of all time for many years. Avatar, in my mind, it's just okay. It's not as good as everyone made it out to be, but it's a competent enough film, in my opinion. Now you've got some horror. You have The Babadook, which is an Australian horror film, I believe. And this one, as horrors go, modern horrors don't tend to scare me that much. I lose a lot of the scare factor, but this one actually surprised me. This is a really solid film. So yeah, horror fans, get The Babadook, check it out. Then you have Baby Driver. Great use of music in this, of course, as everyone talks about. Those talks, I think they're going to do a sequel, but I don't know how that would work. But yeah, awesome film, Baby Driver. Another DVD steelbook. This is the 4-disc Ultimate Edition of Back to the Future. So you've got the 3 films in the trilogy and a bonus disc. It absolutely packed with special features on here. Yes, I know it's on Blu-ray and 4K and all that stuff, but for me, a DVD version of the 3 films will do just fine. Now this is a weird one. This is Bag Boy Lover Boy. This came out about 2014. It's a very strange independent horror film about a guy who wants to learn how to be a photographer, but then things go awry. It's very weird, that's all I'll say. It's a very strange, bizarre film. Some of you might not like it, but, you know, it's worth a watch, just for morbid curiosity's sake. Batteries Not Included. This is a really cute film from the late 80s. I won't say much more on it because I haven't seen it in years and I don't want to get any plot wrong or anything, but yeah, highly recommend this. It's a great family film. Now, Mr. Bean's Holiday, the better of the Bean movies in my opinion. I don't own the first Bean movie anymore, but this one, really solid film. Really enjoy that one. Now we have some Beatles stuff. We have 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, which was also made by Ron Howard. This is basically a documentary looking at when they toured, because of course they didn't tour all the way through their 8 years or whatever they were together. They only really toured from 1962 to 1966. So really great. It's 2 discs as well. Great to have that in the collection. And we also have Be Kind Rewind. Now, I love this film because obviously it's digging on VHS culture, that thing, you know, Blockbuster, rental tapes and stuff. Really cute film, so yeah, recommend Be Kind Rewind. Then we move on to the other side of the shelf, as it were, and what have we got to kick off? We have this, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. This is a recent Tom Hanks film where he plays Mr. Rogers, the famous American kids host. Really beautiful film. I mean, yes, I guess Americans will connect to it more because they know Mr. Rogers more, but this is still, in my opinion, a very beautiful story, and it's definitely worth a watch. Tom Hanks is great, as always. Then you have more horror, The Belko Experiment. This is messed up. Very cool horror, but very messed up. Highly recommend that one. I think you can get that for really cheap now as well, so it's not too inexpensive. Then you have Big Trouble in Little China. Really cool John Carpenter film from the 80s. I know this has had I think a Blu-ray steelbook recently, but yeah, highly recommend this one. That one is really, really, really cool. Some more horror. This is more horror comedy. This is Black Sheep. Zombie Sheep. That's all I'll say about that one. Really messed up, but really funny at the same time. Then you have this one, Blinded by the Light. This is the film which uses Bruce Springsteen's music to tell a story. And yeah, it's a very powerful film, very enlightening film. I have that Sony Walkman, of course. But yeah, highly recommend that one. It's not as good as some of the other music, you know, doc dramas we've had, but it's still good. Back to some classic horror, we have The Blob from 1958. Now, this was a pain to get. This was actually quite expensive. I don't know if it's ever come down in price, but it's nice to own the original Blob. I don't own the 80s version of The Blob. I don't even think that has a DVD release yet in this country. It might do now, but it certainly didn't when I picked this up. But yeah, classic 50s. Steve McQueen's brilliant if you want to see him in an early role before, like, The Great Escape and all that. Now, this one I watched recently, The Boat That Rocks. This is a really funny and great story about pirate radio here in the UK. Admittedly, I hadn't seen this for years and really wanted to, and now I'm glad I have. It's such a funny British movie. Recommend that one. And of course, this one's getting a sequel soon. It's Borat with Sacha Baron Cohen, probably one of his most infamous characters. And yeah, Borat, I enjoy Borat. I mean, obviously more as a kid when it's a bit more edgy. I wonder if I'd watch it now, if I'd still find it funny. But I am excited to check out the sequel, which of course is coming out near the US election. How very apt. And then you have this, Borg versus McEnroe. Now, this tells of the rivalry between, well, Borg and McEnroe, who are two tennis players who faced off in 1980 Wimbledon. And for someone who likes my sport dramas, I really like this. Again, I'd highly recommend Borg versus McEnroe. It's not the best sports movie ever. It's not on the levels of, like, I don't know, I, Tonya or Eddie the Eagle for me. But this is still a really fun film, so recommend that one. Now you have Boyhood. Now, Boyhood is directed by Richard Linklater, who directed the Before trilogy, which we will get onto in a later segment. But this film was filmed over 12 years, from 2002 to 2014. This kid, it's the same kid they film him, I think it's from the age of 6 till 18. And it's a very long film, but I mean, these 5-star reviews big it up, and it's true. It is so worth the watch. It's very well made, and it's just a brilliant movie. It's a brilliant concept, and I always love Richard Linklater for trying these more abstract things. So yeah, Boyhood is a must recommend from me. Then you've got Brighton Rock, which is a film from the late 40s, but it's got Richard Attenborough in it, and it's also got William Hartnell, pre-First Doctor, and it's actually really weird to see Bill Hartnell in a role other than Doctor Who, just because I'm so used to it. But yeah, really classic British film. Bubba Hotep. This film is just odd. Like, this film's very bizarre. You've got a guy you've got Elvis, and this guy who believes he's John F. Kennedy, even though he's black. It's a very weird movie, but a lot of fun. Recommend at least try Bubba Hotep. Then you've got The Bucket List, featuring two greats of cinema, Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. Just two guys who want to tick things off their bucket list. Really heartwarming film. I saw it when it came out. I was probably a bit young, but I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy it now. It's really, really good fun. Then you have The Butler. Really great film. Forrest Whitaker as the butler. I can't remember his name, which is really bad, but it is about the butler who served many generations in the White House. And again, brilliant film. Highly recommend that one. Now you've got some independent horror, Carnival of Souls. Now this came out in the 60s, and this is one of those public domain films. There's so many releases of this. I've got this one from Elstree Hill Entertainment, and yeah, it's actually a really eerie horror film. It doesn't rely so much on jump scares. I'd actually recommend checking out, if you're going for just certain 60s horror, check out Carnival of Souls. It's something a bit different. Now you've got Casino Royale. This is, of course, not the Daniel Craig one. This is from 1967. This is the comedy skit version, if you like, of the James Bond series, featuring Peter Sellers and David Niven. It's very much a product of its time. It's quite dated, but if you're a James Bond completionist and you want to see everything they put out, not just the main canon stuff, then Casino Royale is there for you. It's dead cheap to come across. Then you have Catch Me If You Can. Great film with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Highly recommend that one. One of my favourite films of all time now, Chicken Run. I know they're getting the sequel. Bit annoyed they're not getting the two leads back to voice their characters. Hopefully they change that. But this is just pure joy in a film. Always makes me laugh. Infinitely quotable. Infinitely rewatchable. Chicken Run, yeah, definitely in my top 10 films of all time. And it should be in yours too. Now we've got the Child's Play series. As you can see here, they make up about, I think it's 8 films. So you've got the original Child's Play from the late 80s. Great film. You've got Child's Play 2. Not as good, but, you know, decent enough. Then you've got Child's Play 3, which I admit I thought was like the weak link in the series at that point. Then you've got Bride of Chucky, where they sort of went into the more horror comedy territory, and you've got Jennifer Tilly as the bride. It's still fun, but yeah, it's very much more horror comedy now. Then you had Seed of Chucky, where they have a child. Again, horror comedy. This was about 2004. Then they went back to a bit more straight horror with Curse of Chucky, which I think was 2013. And then they went even more with that with Cult of Chucky in 2017. Really messed up film. And then they went for the reboot in 2019 with Child's Play. Just Child's Play. And I watched this, and yeah, it's decent. It's not the worst horror film I've ever seen. It's certainly not the best. and it's just a pretty standard reboot. I'm kind of gutted they replaced Brad Dourif, who'd always voiced Chucky, for Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill's great, but whenever he does this creepy thing, I just always hear his version of the Joker. So not a bad reboot, but not the best reboot ever made either. Then you've got Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, one of the, well, most classic films ever. A lot of people actually don't know the script for the movie adaptation was adapted by Roald Dahl, of all people, would you believe? And it was an Ian Fleming novel, the James Bond author. Great film, though. And then it seems like we have another steelbook. We have, yes, Cloverfield. This was such a big, I remember when this came out, this was such a big deal. Like, there was so much mystery around it. It was that found footage style. And a really great film. I haven't seen the sequels. I probably should, because I hear good things about them. You got Commando, a classic 80s Arnold Schwarzenegger action film. Just a lot of fun. Don't take it too serious, but I'd highly recommend Commando, definitely. Then you've got Creed, which is the continuation of the Rocky series. So you've got Stallone still playing Rocky, but the main focus is now on Apollo Creed's son. And I don't own the sequel yet on DVD, and I wonder if they're going to make more, like, you know, a 3, 4, etc. But yeah, I enjoyed Creed for what it was worth. Then you have Creep, which is just a very weird horror film from the mid-2000s. Basically, the premise is someone falls asleep in the London Underground, then it closes, and hilarity ensues. So yeah, and very weird. Crocodile, very low budget. It's from the same director as the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but this was when CGI was starting to become a thing, and it's just a bit dated now, not the best film, but it has a gag here and there. And then moving towards the end of the shelf, you have Daddy Daycare. I don't usually go for these sort of really young orientated family films, but I remember seeing this when I was a kid and I really enjoyed it, and I think it's one of those few Eddie Murphy family movies that still really holds up, so that's why I still have it. Then you've got The Darkest Dawn. Now, this is actually made by my friend, Drew Casson. Yeah, he basically made his own film independently. It's really cool. It's a very cool film. You can buy it in HMV, of all places, but yeah, it's a really, really cool film. So go and support Drew. Please go and check out his film, The Darkest Dawn, and all his other work, of course. I think he's actually doing something for Netflix now, which is really awesome. And then you have Darkest Hour, which, of course, was a winner for Best Actor for Gary Oldman. This tells the story of how Churchill became Prime Minister during World War II, and yeah, his performance is great, and definitely one people should watch. So kicking things off, we have The Day After Tomorrow, a disaster movie of the same person who made Independence Day. I didn't mind this one. It was around mid-2000s, you know, special effects and all, but I don't mind it. Nice special edition too. Got Dead Silence, which is an eerie horror film by the people who made Saw. Again, not as good as Saw, but I quite like this one. Now, I watched this recently, The Death of Stalin, made by the same guy who made the Thick of It TV show. This is a great film, really funny, really great comedy, some really great performances as well. Basically, if you like the Thick of It, if you like his style, you'll really enjoy Death of Stalin. Now, we've also got Denial, which is about Timothy Spall playing a Holocaust denier, and Rochelle Weisz trying to convince him otherwise. Yeah, really good, like, courtroom drama film, very powerful as well when you get down to it. Also powerful is this film, Detroit, which stars John Boyega and a whole bunch of other famous faces you might recognise. This is about the 1967 Detroit riots. Again, very powerful, very moving film. Highly recommended, though. Excellent, excellent film. Then you've got The Devil's Rejects, a very messed up horror film. If you don't like gore, that is not one for you. But again, very interesting as a horror fan, but yeah, very messed up as well. You got Diana, starring Naomi Watts. Here, actually, they're making a Diana, either a TV show or another movie. A lot of people didn't like this one. I didn't mind it as much. Granted, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I didn't mind this film, to be honest. You've got The Dictator, Sacha Baron Cohen. Of course, Borat 2's coming out soon. And I actually really enjoy The Dictator. I haven't seen it in a while. Will I probably not find it as funny as I did in 2012? Maybe. But yeah, I enjoyed this one for what it was. And this film, Dirty Dancing, this is the 30th anniversary collector's edition. Of course, this is a classic 80s film. And this just has like loads of things on it, loads of special features, loads of extras like posters, postcards, all that sort of stuff. So to get the DVD and all those extras, at the time I think it was only about £7. That was a really great find, and a great movie as well, Dirty Dancing is. A DVD steelbook now with District 9, a really great film. Of course, this was nominated for Best Picture in 2009. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's a really, really cool film. Nice to have this DVD steelbook as well. I know there's probably a Blu-ray one, but again, they made some DVD steelbooks, and I picked that one up. Now you've got, oh god, Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which a lot of people forget was directed by Stanley Kubrick, the same guy who made 2001, Clockwork Orange, but it stars big names Peter Sellers, George C. Scott. It's a very weird film. You've got to be paying attention a lot. It talks a lot about the conflicts in the world at the time, but a very good film nonetheless. And now one of the funniest films I grew up with during childhood, Dodgeball, starring Vince Vaughn and Ben Stiller. This might not be as funny now, but honestly, if you haven't seen Dodgeball, you'll probably get a laugh out of it. It's just so stupid and wacky, and Vince Vaughn and Ben Stiller wham it up to the max. But it's, you know, cracking film in its own right. Now you've got Dog Soldiers, which I watched recently. This is an early 2000s sort of British horror action film starring Sean Pertwee, John Pertwee's son, and yeah, again, very cool premise, good special effects, scary in some places, just an all-round good movie. So yeah, check out Dog Soldiers. And then you got Dunkirk, a Christopher Nolan movie. I really enjoyed this. I saw this in IMAX, which I believe is the best way to see it. It's a very powerful film. Again, maybe not the best war movie I've ever seen, but nice to have it on the shelf nonetheless. This was always a great find. This is Easy Rider, the special edition. This is a nice big chunky box set, and again, like the Dirty Dancing one, this comes with all sorts of extra goodies, loads of special features and stuff. This was at the time the 35th anniversary, so this was released in 2004, and would you believe I picked this up from a charity shop for a crisp £1, and it all plays perfectly. A good example of the deals you can find if you just look in the right places. Fully on E now, we've got this film, Ed Wood, which stars Johnny Depp and directed by Tim Burton. For anyone who doesn't know, Ed Wood is a famous B-movie director from the 50s. His movies were never that good, but hey, he always tried, and he had a few things he wanted to get out there. You know, he liked to... well, he was a closeted man, shall we say, but a very powerful, great film, so check out Ed Wood. And one of my favourite films, Eddie the Eagle, starring Taron Egerton and Hugh Jackman, based on the guy, Eddie, who wanted to go to the Olympics, and he did, the winter ones in 1988. Yes, it's a sports film, but I often find sports films can be very powerful like this, and I loved Eddie the Eagle. The music soundtrack is fantastic, all original sort of 80s sounding music. And yeah, it's just it's a feel-good film. You'll like it, so check out Eddie the Eagle if you haven't seen it already. Now you've got these films here, the Edgar Allan Poe films, if you like, that were made in the 1960s, a lot of them by Roger Corman, starting with this, The Fall of the House of Usher, which stars Vincent Price. You've got The Pit and the Pendulum from 1961, which also stars Vincent Price. Then, moving away from the same company that put them out, you've got The Premature Burial, and that stars Ray Milland. I don't think Vincent Price is actually in it. Then the fourth one in this is Tales of Terror, which is like a compilation film, and actually it's a really good one, and you've got Vincent Price, Peter Lorre and Basil Rathbone in it. Really great entry in that series. Then moving to Blu-ray briefly, we have The Haunted Palace, which also stars Vincent Price. I have this on Blu-ray because, to my knowledge, still, this was not released on DVD here in Region 2. I think there's a Region 2 DVD in the US, but alas, it is only on Blu-ray here. It's an Arrow release as well, which is pretty cool. And being as it's Arrow, you know, you got tons of special features, and it's on Blu-ray, so bit annoying it doesn't sort of fit with the rest, but I didn't have any other choice. You have The Raven, which stars Vincent Price, Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff. Really cool film there. Then in the 64, you've got The Mask of Red Death, again starring Vincent Price. This is one of the favourites of mine of this set. And finishing with The Tomb of Ligeia, again starring Vincent Price. This is probably one of the weakest films, probably because Vincent Price, as much as I love him, was probably miscast in this one. He was a bit too old for the part. But, you know, it concluded the Edgar Allan Poe stuff there. Now you've got The Elephant Man, starring John Hurt. This is a beautiful, beautiful film about the tragic story of John Merrick, who was disfigured, quite frankly, and how he was shunned and how he just wanted to live a life, basically. It's a very powerful film. John Hurt does a fantastic job alongside Anthony Hopkins. So definitely watch The Elephant Man if you haven't seen it. You won't be disappointed. Now you've got Erin Brockovich, a really inspiring film about a woman who went a great way to change things. Just a really great film starring Julia Roberts, probably my favourite role of hers. You've got Escape from New York, a John Carpenter film starring Kurt Russell. This is sort of classic 80s stuff. I can't remember if they've done a remake of this. There was definitely a sequel, which I haven't seen, but this is a really fun film. You've got Escape Plan, which I think I only mainly got because it is Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone teaming up. They're like two guys trying to escape a prison. Really, really cool premise. I know they've done sequel after sequel that I haven't watched. I don't know if they're any good. You've got some James Bond now with Everything or Nothing. This was a documentary that was released in 2012 for the 50th anniversary of the film series. It basically talks to most of them, you know, interviews about the franchise and stuff. I'm glad they did a DVD release of this, because I saw this once on a plane flight, and I was really worried they never put it out on DVD, but alas, here it is. They did put it out. Then one of the classic films of the 80s, E.T., which is, of course, directed by Steven Spielberg. If you haven't seen E.T., what are you doing? You need to watch this film, man. And then in the corner, you've got this, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the first in the new series starring Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander. I really liked this first film. The second one wasn't so good, and I don't own that on DVD just yet, but the first one I actually really did enjoy. Always been a Harry Potter kind of guy. And this one, you got Fences with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. I really enjoyed this film. I know it's based on a play, and a lot of people didn't like this in comparison to the play, but I haven't seen it, but I really enjoyed the film. It's very real, it's very raw. Great performances from Denzel and Viola. Absolutely stunning. So yeah, check out Fences if you haven't seen it already. And you've got this, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of the classic John Hughes 80s movies starring Matthew Broderick. Loads of people love Ferris, and yeah, very feel-good, very fun 80s movie, and I think I said in part 1, I love those sorts of movies, so nice to have this. Now moving on to the second side of the shelf and kicking off with this box set. This is the Final Destination Thrillology, which basically contains Final Destination 1, Final Destination 2, and Final Destination 3. These films are a really big guilty pleasure of mine. I watched them when I was a teen, and yes, I know they're meant to be horror, all about people dying one by one, but me and my friends often just found them funny. You know, we just wanted to laugh about who was going to die next in what abstract way, so nice to have that. But don't worry, I also have the fourth film, which they stupidly titled The Final Destination 3D. This was my big gripe with this. Yes, they released it in 3D, that doesn't really matter, but they called it The Final Destination, which, just call it Final Destination 4, don't try and do that gritty reboot sort of thing, because they went back on it for the next one, Final Destination 5 here. They went back to the numbers, so you've got Final Destination 1, 2, 3, then The Final Destination, then Final Destination 5. But for the record, this was the only one I saw in the cinema with my brother, and we loved this one. This was a really great return to form for the series, and a nice conclusion. They haven't made one since, in the 9 years since this one, and I think I just want them to leave it. The 5 films stand nice as they are. More recent film now, you've got this one, First Man, with Ryan Gosling. Now, this was all about the guys getting to the moon in the Apollo 11, you know, Neil Armstrong and all that. Really great film. Maybe a little bit too long, but a very nice film to watch nonetheless, especially if you're into space stuff. But from space, you're going back to World War II with this. This is a DVD steelbook. It's the 2 films Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, both directed by Clint Eastwood. Now, the premise of this was always good. You know, 2 films, one looking at the American side of the conflict and one looking at the Japanese side. Because, of course, Letters from Iwo Jima is completely in Japanese. And it's the better film. Flags of Our Fathers I found really boring, really slow, didn't really go anywhere. Letters from Iwo Jima is so powerful, so much better, a more engaging film. But nice to have the 2 films in a steelbook combo. Another DVD steelbook now. This is Flash Gordon. This is the Silver Anniversary edition, so the 25th anniversary. Flash Gordon, again, released in 1980. Very fun, quirky film based on the old serials. And yeah, just a really fun old film. I know if you're interested, they've done a recent Blu-ray or 4K steelbook of this, so those of you who are into that might want to grab that instead. Now you've got Flight 93, which is a very powerful film, of course, about the September 11th attacks. I think that speaks for itself. But yeah, if you're interested in checking that out, just be warned, of course, it is about what it's about. Another steelbook, we have The Fly. Now this is the 1986 version of The Fly, starring Jeff Goldblum. One of the best horror films of the 1980s. Really horrific, like, effects that are really grotesque, but a really great story as well. Great update of the 50s Fly, so definitely check that out. We have Forbidden Planet, one of the best 50s science fiction films of all time. This is the 50th anniversary edition, which I believe goes for a fair bit of cop now. It's on 2 discs, and, you know, great characters with Walter Pidgeon and Anne Francis, and Leslie Nielsen, of course, appeared in this, but yeah, one of the most iconic 50s films of all time. Check out Forbidden Planet. Now, one of a niche film, The Founder. So this stars Michael Keaton as Ray Kroc, the guy who discovered the McDonald's brothers of, well, McDonald's fast food, and basically made it into what it is today. I mean, he was a clever guy, but he was also a cruel guy. And a lot of people didn't like this, but I'd actually recommend watching it. It's very interesting, the insight into it. And yeah, it was one of my favourite films of that year. Four Lions, what a classic film this was. This is from 2010, and how I always describe this to people is this is a film about 4 guys who want to be terrorists but are bad at being terrorists. So that's all the description I'm going to give you, but very funny film and a very old film now. This is Freaks, of course a term we don't really use anymore. Todd Browning's Freaks. This was released in 1932 and it's rated 15 for a reason. It is very grotesque. It doesn't leave much to be desired. There's a lot of well, things that would be considered 15 even back then. It's very harrowing, so if you're not into people being sort of abused for their disfigurements, if you like, maybe don't watch it. But as a piece of history, it was an interesting watch. Now, this set was always interesting. This is Friday the 13th. This is the first 8 films. So it says even there, from Crystal Lake to Manhattan. And I don't know if in Region 2 they've ever released a more updated set with these films. They probably have done, but this was quite elusive from some time, and I believe now is quite expensive. I got mine for 30 quid, but I think it goes even higher than that now, from what I understand. But this has the first 8 Friday the 13th films, which, you know, they made that many. Yes, they did. 8 films, no mercy. And, you know, they are what they are. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but that's like a lot of horror these days. Though I will say I think the original is the best, as is the case with a lot of these franchises. Here's Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. This was quite hard to find on DVD. I don't know if they've made that easier, but yeah, a bit underwhelming. The Final Friday it was called. Well, no, here's Jason X, which came out some years later. So, but essentially Friday the 13th 10, this is all about like Jason in space. It was the early 2000s, man. It was a weird time. And also have to have Freddy vs. Jason, of course. This was the crossover with Nightmare on Elm Street. Actually not a bad crossover. Could have been better, but for what it is, I really enjoyed it. I don't own the Friday the 13th remake because, well, why would I? Here's Future World, and I don't know why I didn't put these two together. Westworld, not the TV show, the original film from the 70s. This is the sequel to Westworld. Is it as good? No. Is it still interesting? To a degree, but we'll get to Westworld in another part, I guess. On to G, we're on Get Out, one of the most acclaimed horror films from the year it came out. I think it was 2017. And yeah, there's a reason. This film is really, really good. Like, the pacing, the horror elements. Jordan Peele did a fantastic job. I still haven't seen Us, though, which was his next film. Now we're into some Godzilla. You might wonder where the first films are, but they're in a different part of my collection. You'll see that in another video. But so on the DVD shelf, you've got Godzilla 1984, which was the first reboot and the start of the Heisei era. Then you've got Godzilla vs. Biollante. This is all of these, actually, of the classic ones are Region 1 discs. They haven't had Region 2 releases, which is really annoying. And this one is quite hard to find or import, should I say. It'll cost you a bit more, but it was actually a good film. Then the rest of the Heisei era is on this box set, which is actually Region 4, an Australian release. So that has Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, and Godzilla vs. Destroyer, all classic Godzilla films from the 1990s there. And from the same company in Australia, you have the Millennium series. And obviously they've skipped the 98 film, but they're kicking it in with Godzilla 2000, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Godzilla, Mothra, and Ghidorah, all monsters, giant monsters all out attack, or whatever it is. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, or Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 3. Godzilla Tokyo SOS, and Godzilla Final Wars, which is a ton of fun. Godzilla Final Wars, that was like the 50th anniversary finale. Nice to have all these films after so long for wanting them. In the Japan line, you have Shin Godzilla, which came out in 2016, and in terms of the Toho produced films, this is the last one they've made at this point. I know there's the anime trilogy on Netflix, but in terms of like proper films, Shin Godzilla is the most recent. You have Godzilla 98, the first American attempt to do Godzilla, that it's a fine action movie, they just shouldn't have called it Godzilla. Then they tried again in 2014. This one was a bit better, but it took so long for you to actually see Godzilla. That was the main problem with that one. And then they tied in the universe with Kong Skull Island, which is actually a half-decent movie, you know. I wouldn't say it's a bad film at all. And then this, Godzilla King of the Monsters last year. This was an excellent film, bringing back Rodan and King Ghidorah and Mothra and the use of the music. Much better film. One of the best films of 2019. That's not a joke either. Then you have Good Night and Good Luck, which is all about sort of TV in the 50s. George Clooney's in it. It's hard to describe, but it's a very good film. If you're into TV history, you'll like that. Near the end of this side, you've got Good Night, Mr. Tom, which was something I watched in school. It's a classic story about a young boy who gets sent as an evacuee to live with this guy, Mr. Tom, who at first doesn't want to look after him, but, you know, warms to him. It's a very heartwarming film. Definitely check it out. Then you've got Grease, a true musical classic, I think you'll say. Was it say voted best musical ever? Maybe back then it was, of course. And yeah, it's hard not to like Grease. It's a bit cheesy, but yeah, what's that I'll say about Grease? And it's not, you can't see it, but it was on this side. I own the sequel, Grease 2. Right, this film is not bad, whatever anyone says. It's got Michelle Pfeiffer in a really early role. Grease is still the word is a lame tagline. That's a bit lazy, but Yeah, I like it. This was 1982, I think this came out. And basically, whereas Grease 1 was, you know, set in the 50s, but the music was very 70s, this is set in the 60s, but the music sounds very 80s. So, I mean, what you're going to do. But yeah, Grease 2 is a good movie. Okay, what we're kicking off with, an old classic. This is the Gremlins collection, Gremlins 1 and 2. These are some great fun films. The first one was sort of the mid-80s. The second one was 1990, I believe. And funnily enough, I actually ended up watching the second one first. It was recorded off TV for me. I still might have that VHS somewhere. But yeah, I found these fun. I mean, they're rated 15. They're definitely not for maybe little kids, little kids. They're quite gruesome in places, but they're both really fun movies. I enjoy them. I'm glad to have them in the collection. Then we have Grounded. This was my favourite Christmas movie for a very long time. It still might be. Not a lot of people remember it. It came out around 2006, and it's basically about these group of kids who are at an airport and they have to get somewhere in time for Christmas. It's something like that. It might be a bit dated now, but I really loved this as a kid, and I'm, again, glad to have it. Now, this is an excellent war movie, Hacksaw Ridge. Now, this was a big contender for winning all the Oscars. It didn't win that many. I think it won it says that they're editing and sound mixing. This film is about, well, Andrew Garfield plays a part where a guy who didn't want to fight in the war necessarily. He wanted to peacefully do his bit, and it's honestly breathtaking. If you didn't see this in the cinema, you're missing out, but definitely check this out. It's a wonderful, wonderful war movie, and probably my favourite war movie at the minute. Now we have this, the Halloween collection. Halloween is a big horror franchise. Sadly, this isn't all the films. I think there's like a rights thing going on. I still don't know if they've ever released a collection with all of them, but this contains Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, and Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, Halloween 1 and 2, I think, are great. Halloween 3 is very different. Halloween 4 is okay, Halloween 5 is a bit dreary, you know, it all goes a bit downhill from there. It doesn't have Halloween 6 for some reason, which I think is the curse of Michael Myers. It doesn't have H2O or Resurrection or anything like that. And I still need to see the new version from 2018, but alas, it's nice to have at least 5 of the films on one coherent box set. Now I've got some DVD steelbook action with Hancock. Of course, this is a Will Smith film from 2008 about a somewhat reluctant superhero, if you like. A lot of people hated this film. I didn't mind it at the time at all. I thought it was a good laugh. I probably do need to watch it again, but yeah, I've got it on DVD steelbook. I'm not even really sure why. Now we have The Hangover, a classic film from 2009. This one was the best one and debatably the only good one. I was never really a fan of parts 2 and 3, even though I saw them all. Now, as you can see, we've got the Harry Potter films, and these are the 2-disc DVD releases. I'm well aware box sets now have, you know, the 2 discs on Blu-rays and stuff, and to be honest, at some point in the future I might upgrade just to save space, but nevertheless, here we have Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, my personal favourite film out of this whole saga, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Now, I never actually read Deathly Hallows, I'm not sure why, and a lot of my friends who did say that this is a very unsatisfying conclusion, which is a shame, but honestly, if you see these DVD releases, you're only getting them on DVD, get them for the bonus content. The bonus content in them is really, really good. As I say, I think all the Blu-ray box sets now, or 4K releases, have all these special features in them, double check that, but I think that's all in there. But yeah, it's always nice to have the Harry Potter collection. I grew up on these films. I saw the first one in the cinema when I was 5, and all the way through to this one when I was 15. So yeah, nice to own the whole saga on DVD, but I'll probably upgrade to Blu-ray at some point in the future. Now this is a funny little film. This is Help, I'm a Fish. Now this is a film not a lot of people talk about, but I really enjoy this film. It's from about 2000. It's not from any of the major animation companies, but it's got some pretty big voice talent. I mean, that evil fish there is voiced by Alan Rickman of all people. It's a really fun film, maybe a little bit dated to some extent, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had in it. So check out Help, I'm a Fish. Don't think you'll be disappointed. And now we have the High School Musical trilogy. Now, don't hate me on this, I was late to this. I never really watched them at the time. It was more at university when a lot of my housemates raved about it, and then we, you know, decided to check it out. And yeah, they're a guilty pleasure, I must admit. Really big guilty pleasure, the HSM trilogy there. Now we have The Hills Have Eyes, a classic horror film from the late 70s. This film is very creepy, and again, not necessarily for the faint of heart. If you get like scared or freaked out easily, you should probably stay away from this one, but it comes in this nice slipcase and it's a 2-disc special edition. But yeah, nice bit of horror history there. Now we have Hitchcock, which was a 2012 or 13 film, I believe, a docudrama, if you will, about Alfred Hitchcock himself and how he went on to make the film Psycho, debatably his most recognisable film. And this had some big names. I mean, Anthony Hopkins is playing Hitchcock, Helen Mirren is his wife, Scarlett Johansson is in it. I think she's playing Tippi Hedren. I need to double check that. But yeah, a really good film, actually. I quite enjoyed it. This is a funny one, Hobo with a Shotgun. I mean, I was sold on the title and the cover art alone. It's got Rutger Hauer in it, who died recently, sadly, who was also in Blade Runner, I believe. And this is just pure fun. It's like a proper grindhouse film, really silly, lots of action, lots of blood and all that sort of stuff. If you're into that sort of thing, you'll enjoy Hobo with a Shotgun, but it is quite ridiculous when you get down to it. Some Disney classic now, Hocus Pocus, of course. This is a classic Halloween film from the 90s. Pretty timeless, pretty fun. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy are brilliant. So yeah, check out Hocus Pocus. Now these films are fun, aren't they? The Hostel trilogy. These were released in like the mid to late 2000s. Lots of gore. I mean, I think from what I remember of the plot, it results on people like buying the guests and stuff or something messed up like that. Basically, it's very messed up. Very gruesome horror, akin to the Saw films, if not even worse. So, again, if you're not the faint of heart, you don't need to watch this. You need to stay well away. Hot Fuzz, a classic part of what's known as the Cornetto trilogy. This is the middle part, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. It's probably my favourite part of the Cornetto trilogy, to be honest. I mean, don't get me wrong, Shaun of the Dead is good, and I haven't seen The World's End. Oh, no, I have, sorry, yeah, but I do prefer Hot Fuzz itself. Now this is a weird one, House of a Thousand Corpses. This is an early 2000s film by Rob Zombie, of White Zombie fame, of course. And yeah, it's pretty messed up, as you can see from the cover. And from what I remember, it actually serves as a vague prequel to The Devil's Rejects, which you would have seen in a previous part. But again, one of those horror films not for the faint of heart. Speaking of which, the original House of Wax from the 1950s starring Vincent Price. This is a wonderful film, and despite its age, it holds up really, really well. I am aware originally it was meant to be in 3D. I think the Blu-ray version contains that 3D. I'm not too bothered about 3D myself. And as a fun little bonus feature, this actually contains the original, I believe it's the 30s film, The Mystery of the Wax Museum on it, which is a nice little bonus to have on there. But yeah, check out House of Wax, it's a wonderful movie. You've got Hugo. This was a really fun film, a Martin Scorsese picture, of course, and it won 5 Oscars. Yeah, a lot of heart, a lot of magic to it. It's just it's just a great bit of fun. So yeah, I'd recommend Hugo if you haven't seen it. Now this was a very powerful film, Daniel Blake. The basic premise is this guy here is in construction all his life, I believe. He gets made redundant, and then he's basically shafted by the current job system our government has, by the universal credit system. And it's a really sad story, but very powerful, and needs to be seen by a lot of people in our time, I'm afraid. So yes, definitely watch Daniel Blake if you haven't seen it, especially if you're in the UK, very important. One of my favourite films, I, Tonya. I'm a sucker for the sport docudrama stuff. I don't know why, I'm not really that into sport, but I used to train as a figure skater, so this one had a bit of connection to me, and this is a brilliant film, one of my favourite films ever. I mean, you've got Margot Robbie, Sebastian Stan, Alison Janney. The cast are wonderful. The way the film is done is brilliant. Honestly, like, if you haven't seen it, check out I, Tonya. Brilliant, brilliant movie. Now, an odd one for Daniel Radcliffe. This is Imperium. This is a film where he basically goes undercover as a neo-Nazi. So Daniel Radcliffe with a skinhead spouting racial slurs undercover. It's quite weird, but it's a really great performance from Daniel Radcliffe. So for that alone, I'd recommend Imperium. Then you have The Impossible, a very heart-wrenching film about the tsunami that happened back in 2004. It stars Naomi Watts, Ewan McGregor, and who's that face there? Yep, that is a very young Tom Holland. As I say, this is 2012, so a good few years before Spider-Man at this point. But yes, it's a very harrowing story. It's based on a true story, and I would recommend it. But again, it will probably make you cry. Now, this film was a surprise for me. The In-Betweeners movie, when this came out in 2011, I'd actually never seen the TV show, and I don't know why. But a big group of us were at the cinema. You know, a lot of people had seen the show and wanted to see it. So I went along, and I thought it was one of the funniest films I'd seen in my life. And not all of it holds up today. A lot of it still does. The sequel's a bit, but for what it's worth, the In-Betweeners movie is still a really good laugh. And we have Inception, of course, a classic film from Christopher Nolan. You really got to be paying attention to this one, starring Leonardo DiCaprio amongst several others. And yeah, it is as good as people say it is, those who like it anyway. I do need to watch it again, it has been a while, but yeah, classic movie. And the last one on this shelf is In Time. It's still got its CEX stickers. I paid £3 for this, really? This is an interesting one because it's got Justin Timberlake, yes, that Justin Timberlake, and Amanda Seyfried. And it's in a world where the whole premise is you've got like time encrypted on you and you have to buy more time to survive. It's a very odd concept, but it's a really fun film, actually. This looks like a rental copy, yeah. I got it from CX. Need to rip off those stickers. But yeah, I'd recommend In Time, especially if you haven't seen it before. And now we trundle on to the other side of the shelf, and the first one we have here is In the Loop, which is sort of the film pseudo-sequel to The Thick of It, the TV show. Really funny. If you like The Thick of It, you'll definitely like this. Peter Capaldi is fantastic. And fun fact about this, I picked this up on the last day of my local Blockbuster in 2013. Everything was like 90% off, so I ended up getting this for about 10 pence. So, you know, I had to buy something. Next, we have a recent film. This is The Invisible Man from 2020, starring Elizabeth Moss. And this was one of the best horror films of the year. I mean, it doesn't follow the sort of old Universal style Invisible Man, you know, sort of mad scientist turned mad by what he's discovered, but it's a very harrowing film about, you could argue, you know, physical abuse, mental abuse. It's very powerful, basically, and I highly recommend it. Really, really great film. An old classic, everyone's got to have The Iron Giant. If you don't like this film or don't find it heartwarming, I'm convinced you don't have a soul, but yes, I really enjoy The Iron Giant. I need to upgrade that DVD, actually. The Iron Lady, this is where Meryl Streep played Margaret Thatcher, everyone's favourite. But you know what, as a documentary about Margaret Thatcher and her life, it's actually very good. Meryl Streep does a wonderful job, and I would recommend it to people who are interested in that part of history. It's a Wonderful Life, Gotta Be Done, James Stewart, Donna Reed, one of the most classic films of all time. It's just, yeah, it is a wonderful film about It's a Wonderful Life. So, yeah, highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, but your heart will be warm to no end. And the complete opposite from It's a Wonderful Life, you have the Jackass series. So this box set has the first movie, it has the second movie, and it's got the middle movie 2.5. I love these. I mean, they're just a good bit of fun, you know, guys messing around, being stupid. I also have Jackass 3, which is the first one I saw in the cinema, and that was just as good, if not maybe the best one as the others. I don't have Jackass 3.5, I'm pretty sure they made that a thing, but I hear there's talks they're going to be doing a Jackass 4, but yeah, if they do, I'll probably go and see that. Now we have Jaws, the classic 70s film. And I mean, it's Jaws. What do you want to say about it? One of the greatest suspenseful films of all time, if you like. Now we have a double feature, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but this has two versions. It has the 1932 version starring Frederick March and the 1941 version by Spencer Tracy. Now, back in the day, they made several Jekyll and Hyde. I mean, that's not even the oldest. They made one from 1920. But out of these two, I prefer the 1932 version, way more atmospheric. Now we have Jigsaw, which is the continuation of course, the Saw franchise. It came out a few years ago, and they haven't made another one since, and part of me doesn't want to, because for anyone who remembers the original Saw films, they made 7, and after that, it was kind of the end. It says the game continues. They didn't really need to make this, and some people say, why don't you put it with the Saw films? It's technically Saw 8. Well, yes, I know it is, but it's under J, so I'm going to just keep it at Jigsaw. Thank you very much. Now we have these, John Wick, starring Keanu Reeves, everyone's favourite. I didn't see this at the time when it came out, but I've watched it since, and these films are actually really, really good. I highly recommend them, hence why I picked up John Wick 2 as well. I haven't seen John Wick 3 yet, so I do need to probably pick that up and give it a watch. I'm sure it's just as good as the others. But yeah, really surprisingly fun and cool action film with Keanu. And then we have Jojo Rabbit. This was a fairly recent purchase. I mean, what else is there to say? It's a wonderful film, a great direction by Taika Waititi, and performances all around. Just check it out, it's really good fun. The Joker film, of course, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Robert De Niro. I mean, this swept everyone's expectations, and it is a really insightful picture about mental health, so if you haven't seen it, just know that it is quite a heavy-hander. Always good to note. This is an odd one, Kentucky Fried Movie. No, this is not a film about KFC. It's from the makers of Airplane, Hot Shots, and Naked Guns, so sort of, you know, those parody films. But I think this was before all of those, actually, because this was 1977, and you can tell it's sort of the really early stages of that genre, if you like. It's got a few funny sequences, a few cool cameos, like George Lazenby, the one-time Bond pops up, but yeah, very bizarre movie, Kentucky Fried Movie. Now we have Kes, one of the classic British films. David Bradley stars in this. It's a Ken Loach film from 1969. This is in the HMV movie classics slip art there. So yeah, it's very thick Yorkshire accent, so if you're not used to it, you might need to beware. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic film, Kes. Now we've got the Hood trilogy, which I do file under K, as the first one's K. My alphabetizing system is all over the place, don't at me. So first we have Kidulthood, which came out in 2006. This is all about like the London youth of the time and what it was like, basically. And this one actually has a CD soundtrack part of it, which I think is really cool. But yeah, very harrowing film. Might be a bit dated in some respects, but it's an essential watch, I think, if you're British. Then there was the sequel, Adulthood, which came out 2 years later, and it actually follows Noel Clarke's character, who was the bully in the first one, so it's a nice continuation there. Then you have the threequel, which was titled Brotherhood, which again focuses on Noel Clarke's character, but also features appearances from people like Stormzy, so it's a pretty good conclusion. To Kill a Mockingbird, classic film from the 60s with Gregory Peck. If you don't know the story, if it wasn't taught to you in school, please go and watch this or read the book. One of the most essential films ever, I'd argue. Bit of King Kong now. We've got the original from 1933. This is a very bare bones DVD. I actually got this for free from a library clearance, and it is literally just the film and nothing else. But it's been remastered, so that's alright. Then you got Peter Jackson's, the wrong way. You got Peter Jackson's King Kong. This is actually a 2-disc special edition, sorry. I didn't mind this film, I just thought it was a bit too long. Like, way too long, like most of Peter Jackson's work. And then you have The King of New York, DVD steelbook with Christopher Walken. This is a film from the late 80s, which I surprisingly enjoyed. It's got Lawrence Fishburne and Steve Buscemi in, like, younger roles. Yeah, check it out if you can find it. It's an Arrow release as well. Then you got Kingsman, The Secret Service. I really enjoyed this first film. It was a lot of fun. I haven't seen the sequel, or I think they made the threequel, didn't they? I haven't seen it, but yeah, this first one, really loved it. Good start, good start. Knives Out, directed by Rian Johnson, of course, of The Last Jedi fame, or infamy for some people. Yeah, really good sort of whodunit. Daniel Craig's southern accent is laughably hilarious. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but yeah, if you want a good brain teaser, definitely check out Knives Out. It's a lot of fun. Definitely a lot of fun. Classic 80s film now, you have Labyrinth, obviously starring David Bowie. Very iconic film for him. And again, a lot of fun. Very 80s. Then you got Lady Bird, which is one of my favourite films. It's a very simple film, but in terms of what it tells about, you know, growing up and being a teenager, about to go into adulthood, it's very, very powerful. I mean, I'd argue it got shafted at the Oscars, but yeah, I love Lady Bird. A Lady in the Van, a fun little film about a lady in a van that Alan Bennett knew, and it's really fun. It's really fun. Check it out. Then you have The Last Stand, which was Arnold Schwarzenegger's first like big return to the movie fold after he stopped being governor. And what do you expect? It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's just a fun, dopey action movie, and that's all we ever want. Few Les Mis now. We've got the film from 1998 that had Liam Neeson, Jeffrey Rush, Uma Thurman, and Claire Danes. It's a completely straight film, no music in that one, and it's alright. Then you have the musical film that came out in 2012 with the likes of Hugh Jackman and Russell Crowe. And we have Let Him Have It, which is a very early performance for Christopher Eccleston on screen. It was 1991. A very powerful true story. So again, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend this one. Getting to the end now, we've got a DVD steelbook again. This is Alfred Hitchcock's Lifeboat, a film from 1944. Very powerful film about like our fellow man and what we do in that sort of situation. And last but not least, we have Lion, which came out a few years back, about an Indian kid, who gets lost, and then he's ended up adopted by 2 Australians. He grows up there, and then he wants to find out his past. Again, very powerful film, very moving film, so I think that's a nice way to finish things off. Alright, kicking things off with Little Shop of Horrors, the classic film from the 1980s, the classic musical with Rick Moranis. I love this film, it's just so much fun, there's a lot of heart in it, it's very wacky musical. It's definitely one I'd recommend. There is an original from 1960 that has Jack Nicholson in a cameo, but that's the definitive version if you ask me. Next up we have this, Logan from 2017. This was like Hugh Jackman's magnum opus for the character, if you like. It's definitely, in my opinion, his finest appearance as Wolverine, a culmination of 17 years of playing one role, and it's unlikely he's probably going to take up the role again, but you know what? This was a very fitting end for his character, and a great movie as well, so recommend that. Another Logan film, funnily enough, we have this, Logan's Run, which was a film from 1976, very wacky sci-fi film from the time. Of course, it's pre-Star Wars. It's very interesting. It's about like a society where you only live till you're 30, or at least that's what they think. Just a very interesting classic sci-fi film, if you like. Not the best, but not the worst. Now this was a good movie. This is Lovelace, starring Amanda Seyfried. Now it's about the famous porn star Linda Lovelace, who is famous for the film Deep Throat. I'm trying to keep this as family friendly as possible, and it's a very interesting film into, I guess, what that industry was like back in the early 1970s and the lengths they had to go to. It's a very good movie, a very well made movie, and I actually highly recommend it, so no dirty thoughts please. Now we have some really fun films. Here we have Machete, starring Danny Trejo. Machete was like a character in the Spy Kids franchise, like a very small character. He got his own film. It's like gory as anything, proper grindhouse film by Robert Rodriguez, and it's a lot of fun. Like, you're not supposed to take this seriously at all. Just go in with this and have an absolute ball. And there was a sequel 2 years later called Machete Kills. It's down to 15 rather than 18, which is a shame. Lady Gaga's in this one for some reason, but yeah, there she is. See, before Star is Born, of course. I think they plan to make a third film because they do leave it on a cliffhanger. As of 2020, that third film hasn't happened yet. I do hope it does someday, but at the minute, it's not looking that likely, which is a shame. Now I've got this, Maggie, which is an Arnold Schwarzenegger film, and it's a really good acting performance for him. He plays a father who, realistically, his daughter's going to be a zombie. It's like, you know, one of those pandemic films. I won't spoil too much of it, but if you want a good Arnold Schwarzenegger performance, then you definitely need to watch Maggie. It's a very, very good film. Now, one of my favourite films, unashamedly, is Mannequin. I think I've said in previous parts, I am a sucker for 80s, like, feel-good movies, like goofy feel-good movies, and Mannequin is quite literally the definition of that. The premise being that this shop worker, you know, down on his luck, a bit of a dope, this mannequin comes to life, they fall in love, and hilarity ensues. Really fun movie, one of my favourites ever. I love, 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 love it. Next up, we have a DVD steelbook. We've got Metropolis. Now, this film was originally made in 1927. However, this is the 1984 release. Back then, they found some new footage, but being a silent film, they re-released it, but with, like, modern pop songs. So you got songs from Freddie Mercury and Bonnie Tyler and all sorts, and it's a very hit-or-miss version of Metropolis. I'd say it's definitely not the definitive edition of said film. I haven't seen the original yet. I do own it, but yeah, it's an interesting side experiment, I think, that one. Now, I've got a film from Danny Boyle. This is Millions, as far as I know. Oh, no, he's probably made some since, but his very first 12-rated film. Millions is a very heartwarming story. It was released in the mid-2000s. Very heartwarming indeed. Definitely not his best film, but it's fine for what it is. If you like Danny Boyle, you'll probably enjoy this work for what it is. Now, a more good bit of fun. This is Mindhorn, which is basically a pastiche on the whole, you know, 80s detective sort of thing. Very funny, tongue very firmly in cheek. And yeah, there's not much more to it than that, but yeah, it's definitely worth a watch if you're into that sort of comedy. Now, this is an interesting one for me. This is The Miracle Maker, and yes, this is the story of Christ. Now, I'm not religious, I'm actually a raging atheist, but this was always an interesting one for me. This is a stop-motion telling of that, and I remember this being advertised all the time on, like, my VHSs as a kid, and I remember finding the animation style quite interesting, and I watched it a few years ago, and do you know what? It's not, in terms of telling a story, it's not bad. Obviously, I don't believe any of it, but it's a very interesting way of telling that story, so yeah, glad that I finally own it. Now I've got some TV. This is Mr. Men, the complete classic collection. It's a 2-disc set, and this is all episodes of the Mr. Men series in the 70s. I grew up with this stuff, not at the time, but on VHS, and narrated by the wonderful Arthur Lowe, and yeah, it's just there's 28 episodes in total, featuring all the Mr. Men you know and love. There is a Little Miss release as well. I don't own that, but I'll probably get that at some point in the future, but you can't not love Mr. Men, I think. Now we've got The Mummy, the Universal version. I actually have a different version of this, which we'll probably get to in another part. This was a recent release from a few years ago. I love this cover, like the retro movie poster. It comes to life, the 1932 film of The Mummy, and it includes a 90-minute bonus disc with like a brilliant documentary about the Universal monsters. It's one of the main reasons I picked up this release in the first place. So if you like Universal horror, this is a good version of it to get if you just want this film and not any of the sequels. And I've got some James Bond, but the non-canon. This is Never Say Never Again. Yes, it does star Sean Connery as James Bond. He was in his 50s at this point. This came out in 1983. And it's not a good film. This is basically a rehash of the film Thunderball, just nowhere near as good. And I never really liked Thunderball anyway. If you're a James Bond completionist and you want to see everything that was put out, watch it. But again, it's not part of the canon, and it's just not a very good film, if you ask me. Some more TV. This was a brilliant miniseries, The Night Manager, starring Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie. It's absolutely brilliant part series. It was on the BBC. If you haven't seen it and you want to see tour de force performances from both of these leads, it's definitely worth a watch. One of the best dramas on the BBC in recent years. Now we've got this one, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Collection. This was a great set. I've had this for years, actually. I know they've done recent sets, but they're all containing the same films. This has 7 Nightmare on Elm Street films across 8 discs. So you've got Nightmare on Elm Street 1, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, number 3, Dream Warriors, 4, The Dream Master, 5, The Dream Child, 6, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And the 8th disc is just about, you know, documentary special features. It was actually a really great set to pick up, and yeah, I think you can still get this new for like £15. It's definitely worth the money. There are newer sets though. It doesn't contain the remake from 2010, and that's probably for the best because I didn't like that remake at all. It didn't include Freddy vs. Jason, but I guess that's not too bad. That was its own separate thing. Now you've got this of Mice and Men, the classic story by John Steinbeck featuring John Malkovich and Gary Sinise. And this is a really great film. I studied this book in secondary school, so of course we had to watch the film, and it's a really great telling of it, so I highly recommend that if you have an affinity with the book. More classic horror now. We have The Old Dark House. This is a network release actually, but it was directed by the director of Frankenstein, stars Boris Karloff, and The Old Dark House is very much like a haunted house sort of thing, but it's very atmospheric, it's very good despite its age. So yeah, if you like your classic horror, The Old Dark House is certainly one for you. Now we have this, Olympus Has Fallen from 2013, starring Gerard Butler. I really like this one, the idea of the White House being, you know, invaded, and they did make sequels. They made London Has Fallen, and I believe it's Angel Has Fallen. I haven't seen those, I've heard they're not very good, but that first one, I thought the first one was actually really good. And then we have the Omega Man, which is based roughly off the I Am Legend book. And yes, there is the I Am Legend film with Will Smith. However, this came out in the 1970s with Charlton Heston. It's a decent film for what it is. It's nothing groundbreaking at all, but it's fun for what it is. Now we have more Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, but not the Cornetto trilogy. This is Paul, their foray into aliens. And I remember seeing this at the cinema, and at the age 14, this was like the most hilarious thing ever. However, I haven't watched it since, and I'm worried that I'll watch it now and I probably won't find it very funny, so I need to delve back into Paul at some point. Now we have Paul Blart Mall Cop. I see this film get memed a lot, but again, when I watched this at the time, it was actually a decent movie. It's probably very cringe now, and I have seen the sequel. The sequel is not good, you shouldn't watch that, but you know, this is fun for all the family sort of thing, you know. I have a sequel. I usually keep my Disney stuff separate, but some of the sequels I keep to one side, like this one. This is Peter Pan Return to Neverland, or Peter Pan 2. This was released in 2002, nearly 50 years after the original. But do you know what? For a sequel starring Wendy's daughter there on the front cover, it's actually a really competent sequel. I used to have it on VHS, and I enjoyed it. You know, I think with a lot of those Disney sequels, as a kid, you don't realise the jumps in time between when each one was made. I certainly didn't. But yeah, not a bad sequel. Now I've got a set of 2 films. Here is the Abominable Dr. Phibe, starring the master of horror himself, Vincent Price. I do love Vincent Price. This is an early 70s film about a doctor setting traps for people. It's very much like a precursor, if you like, to the Saw franchise and what it wants to achieve. But I did really enjoy this film. It was a good one. And it actually got a sequel the following year called Dr. Phibe's Rises Again. I would argue it's not as good as the original. The original has more impact, but still it has its great horror moments, and I'd highly recommend the sequel. Next up, we have Philadelphia, a classic film from the 90s with Tom Hanks and Denzel Washington, highlighting the discrimination against people who had the AIDS disease back in the 80s and 90s. Very powerful film. I think it's a must-watch. They need to show it in schools and stuff, so check out Philadelphia. Now more pastiche horror. Here's Piranha 3D, which I'm nearly dropping because it's that terrible. I mean, what do you say about this? This is just a very pastiche horror film. It's a laugh. I watch it with friends for a laugh. Do you know what I mean? It's nothing that bad. And then you have this Piranha DD, or 3DD. Get the joke? Haha, so corny. Yeah, this film's not very good either. But, you know, if you want a horror laugh, then that's there for you. Speaking of laughs, here's Porky's from the early 80s. Again, this is very much like a locker room film, like with the lads. It's very pastiche, very corny, but I must admit, very entertaining. I'll give it that much, but I know there's a sequel and stuff. Now you have Race, which is the great story about Jesse Owens at the 1936 Olympics. Of course, then it was held in Berlin, Hitler was in power, and yet this black man ran and pretty much stormed the board. It's a powerful film, a very good film. Highly recommend that one. And then finishing off this side of the shelf, we have The Raid, which is a great foreign film with lots of intense high action and all that sort of stuff. Some of the best fight choreography I've ever seen. So, yeah, check out The Raid if you're into that sort of stuff. And now we move on to the second side of shelf number 4, looking at this, The Railway Children, a classic film starring Bernard Cribbins in a role, amongst others. Again, this was one that I looked at in primary school. We were reading the books, so we had to watch the film, and it's very, very much an old British film, but it's very heartwarming, as a lot of those films are. Now we've got a series, we've got the Rec series, which is Spanish horror films. Really atmospheric. This one is found footage, and a lot of the times I think found footage is a bit awful. However, the Rec series, if I'd had to recommend any found footage horror series, you need to watch Rec. Very powerful horror. Arguably bested, or in my opinion bested, in the sequel, which is Rec 2, Fear Revisited. I'd argue this is even scarier. It takes place, if I remember rightly, on the same night as the first one. So check that out. Then they had to keep going, and they made Rec 3 Genesis, or just Rec Genesis. This one is half found footage, half not found footage. It's a bit jarring. It's not, you know, brilliant. It's a far step down from the first two. And then they had to keep making even more by finishing off the saga with Rec 4, or just Rec Apocalypse. And this takes place on a boat, if I remember, and there's no found footage, and it's just, yeah, it's arguably the weakest of the whole franchise. Stick to the first two of those, but ignore the second two. Now we have this, The Red Turtle, a collaboration with Studio Ghibli and another studio, I can't remember, but what I love about this film is there's hardly any dialogue to it whatsoever, and it's just a really beautiful film to watch. So if you're into that sort of stuff and you've got the patience, check out The Red Turtle. Now you've got some more horror. We have, backwards, The Ring, which of course is not the original Japanese Ringu. This is the Americanized version of that. And Ringu is better, I have seen it, and, you know, but this one's alright for what it is. It's not terrible, but it's by no means the definitive edition of that story. Next up, more foreign films. We have Robo Geisha, which literally is a ridiculous film. It's so out there, so wacky, like Alien vs. Ninja before it. Just, if you're in for a wacky time, Robo Geisha is there for you. Now we have a recent film. We have Rocketman, the story of Elton John. I really enjoyed this film. In terms of comparing this to Bohemian Rhapsody, I think I preferred Bohemian, although I appreciate this one's style more, that it was a bit different, you know, a bit more wacky, because that was very much the life of Elton John, and Taron Egerton smashed it. So, yeah, recommend Rocketman. Now we have Ronin, featuring Robert De Niro, film from the late 90s. DVD Steelbook this as well. Yeah, really good action film. Nothing too special in my opinion, but a very enjoyable film nonetheless. And then next up, more Schwarzenegger. We have The Running Man from 1987. A really cool idea, you know, about a futuristic game show, and of course Schwarzenegger's the main action star. Definitely not his most memorable film, but a worthwhile film to watch nonetheless. And then we have The Sense of an Ending, which is a film starring Jim Broadbent, Michelle Dockery, Charlotte Rampling, amongst others. It's a very sweet film. It's a film about growing older, about lives past. A very British film again, but if you're into that sort of thing, I highly recommend it. Another heartwarming piece. Now I've got some more like London gangs. We have Shank, which is another term for being stabbed, for those who didn't know. It's from the same, it's a distributor of Kidulthood, not the same team necessarily. It's definitely not as good as the Hood trilogy, in my opinion. They're more powerful. This one, but it's alright, you know, it's what you expect looking at the cover. Now we have Danny Boyle's first foray into directing, which was Shallow Grey, featuring Kerry Fox, Christopher Eccleston, and Ewan McGregor, amongst others, in very early roles. And despite being Danny Boyle's first directed piece, this is actually a very competent, very well-made film. I actually really enjoy Shallow Grave. There's a lot of great moments to it, and I highly recommend it, despite it being his first foray. And this is an interesting release I have. This is Shattered Family. Now, from what I understand, this was originally a TV movie. I got this from my grandmother, and she had a bunch of stuff, you know, recorded, and it's actually, I think, a DVD-R. It's an American TV movie about a family, you know, even an 11-year-old has rights. This is his true story, it says. Again, very powerful film for a TV movie, so I'd recommend it, but I don't think there's an official release of this, not to my knowledge. Now, one of the true classics and the highest rated film on IMDb is The Shawshank Redemption. I've got this really cool 3-disc special edition, which has, I mean, it's filled to the brim with, you know, bonus features and special editions of the film. It's just a really great release, and I think I only got it for like £1, so if you can find that, get it, absolutely. And now we have Shutter Island, some more Leonardo DiCaprio. Very good film, but again, it's like Inception. I feel it's one of those you've got to really be paying attention to it to get the most out of it. Some DC now. I don't have much DC, but here is Shazam. I really enjoyed this film. I was very skeptical at first, but then I watched it with my brother, and it actually is like a really fun film. I wish DC took this direction more often, so it's nice to have it now. And then we have a film from the 80s, Short Circuit, which is about a robot becoming sentient and developing a personality. Again, like Mannequin, you could argue it's quintessential 80s cheese, but I love it. I haven't seen the sequel, though, but apparently it's not very good. Now we have a collection. We have the Sidney Poitier collection, a great actor. So we have 4 films. We have In the Heat of the Night, its sequel, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs, the threequel, The Organisation, and a separate film, Lilies of the Field. Now, In the Heat of the Night, of course, won Best Picture in 1967. Lilies of the Field was what won Sidney his Best Actor Oscar, and he was indeed the first black actor to receive that famous award. These films are fun. In the Heat of the Night and Lilies of the Field are the best ones, obviously. These two are more like pastiche and a bit more worse, but, you know, he's a brilliant actor, Sidney Poitier. Now we have Signs, a film from M. Night Shyamalan. M. Night Shyamalan films, I either find I love them or hate them, like most people. This is one of the good ones. Sort of like, you know, alien invasion, crop circle thing. But, yeah, definitely not his worst film. Unlike The Village. I couldn't stand The Village. And then we have The Simpsons movie. I'm a big Simpsons fan, so of course I was going to own the movie. Great film to see when it first came out in 2007. Some more horror with Sinister. And, yeah, as horrors go, like, there's definitely a lot worse out there. But I remember people raved about this at the time, and I just thought there wasn't anything particularly special about it. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. But, yeah, I don't remember raving about that one. Some more now. We have Slither, which still has its sticker on it. That was £1, apparently. Yeah, a very bizarre horror film, but again, very enjoyable. I'm glad I own it. It's, yeah, very weird horror film. And now the best film ever made, of course, Snakes on a Plane with Samuel L. Jackson. This is exactly what you expect, you know, it's very daft, it's very stupid. Samuel L. Jackson's having a whale of a time. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. You owe it to yourself, I think. Now we have The Snowman, the classic animation at Christmas time, originally broadcast on Channel 4. When I bought this, I'd never actually seen The Snowman, but like most people say, it's a very sweet story, and it's very, you know, lovely animation, so yeah, highly recommended. And to finish things off with part 4, we have a lot of Sonic. That's right, starting off with this, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, the box set, the complete series, all 65 episodes. So this show was originally broadcast in the early 90s. In fact, this was my very first introduction to Sonic as a character, not the games, this TV show, watched on holiday. And, yeah, this show is really wacky and out there, definitely aimed at children, which is probably why I loved it when I first saw it. Probably doesn't hold up that well today, but yeah, I mean, 65 episodes, that is good bang for your buck, if you ask me, of this wacky show. And there was more shows, like this one, for example. This is Sonic the Hedgehog, the complete series, all 26 episodes. This is known as Sat AM Sonic. So this aired at the same time as The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. I believe this only aired on Saturdays, hence the term Sat AM. And this series was known for being a lot darker. You know, it was a bit more serious, a bit aimed at kids who are a little bit older. There are special features as well. And yeah, it's just nice to have that variety, I guess. A lot of people think this show's better, and in many ways it is. But it's nice to have the balance of both, like, the kid-friendly stuff and a more, not adult, but mature version, if you like. And then you have this Sonic Underground. This was made in the late 90s, and for some reason they decided to give Sonic 2 siblings, a brother and a sister, and it's all about finding their mother, and they play musical instruments. It's a very strange show that only aired in the late 90s. There's 40 episodes to it, so it's a long time. It didn't really have a proper conclusion from what I remember, but I did used to enjoy this show a lot when it was on. You know, it was fun enough for the age I was, so yeah, all for that there. Nice bit of Sonic. So you got the 3 Sonic series in the corner. So kicking things off here, we have... Of course I was going to own this film. It's Sonic the Hedgehog, the film from 2020, which actually is not a bad film. You need to check this one out, man. It's really not as bad as people made it out to be. One of the best video game movies ever. And it's actually the last film I saw in the cinema. Isn't that mad? 2020. What a year this has been. But no, give Sonic a chance. Now on to a different sort of movie. We have South Park, bigger, extended, and uncut, or whatever it's called. Yeah, the South Park movie's pretty great. It was made pretty early in the show's life, like 1999. I haven't seen the most recent seasons, but this film, I mean, a lot of people know it. It's a great movie. Great film indeed. And another classic, Space Jam, one of my childhood favourites. This is obviously where the Looney Tunes team up with the basketball stars like Michael Jordan, and I know they're making a sequel with, is it LeBron James who's in it? I don't really follow basketball. With another successful basketball player, basically, but nothing will ever beat the original. Now, I have Spectre here, the last Bond film at the time of this recording. No Time to Die will come out. Where's the other James Bond, you ask? I do have it. You'll see it in a future installment, but basically all the other Bond films I have are in a box set. This one is not. I didn't want to spend money on buying another box set just to add Spectre, so I just have it on its own here. Not a bad film, but very out of character for the Daniel Craig films. Some of my favourites, it's the original Spider-Man trilogy, the Sam Raimi films. The first film is definitely like one of my top 10 favourites of all time. I saw that in the cinema when it was out. I've watched it several times. I just love it. It's a great movie. Spider-Man 2 is also a decent movie, and Spider-Man 3, I don't get why everyone hates it so much. It's got flaws, yes, emo Peter Parker and all, but it's not a bad film. I objectively think Spider-Man 3 is not a bad film, and you can argue with me till the end of time if you want. Now, speaking of Spider-Man, we have this, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This was obviously a big surprise to a lot of people. The way they handled the Spider-Man character, and indeed the multiverse of different Spider-Men and women, they did brilliantly, and I can't wait for the eventual sequel that they make. And that quote at the top is right, one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. I'll definitely agree. If you haven't seen Spider-Verse, do yourself a favour and check it out. Now we have another favourite of mine. This is Splash from 1984. It's an early Tom Hanks film, actually. And you know how I said in previous episodes how films like Mannequin are like my guilty pleasure, like goofy 80s movies? This film falls firmly into that, goofy to the core of 80s movies. So yeah, if you like that sort of style, you will like Splash. Now we have Split with James McAvoy, and like a lot of people, I didn't realise until the end of the film that this is the second part in the Unbreakable trilogy. I do have Unbreakable. I don't own Glass yet, but I'd argue this is the strongest part. McAvoy's performance is fantastic, showing all these different personalities, and it's one of M. Night Shyamalan's better films, in my opinion, quite frankly. Yes, SpongeBob the movie. I used to love watching SpongeBob as a kid, and the first movie is sort of the apex of those first few seasons. I am yet to see Sponge Out of Water and Sponge on the Run, I think the new one's called, if it's out, but the first movie will always be great, in my opinion. Now, this is an odd one. We have Spy Kids 3D, and indeed, this is the third Spy Kids film. Where's 1 and 2, do you ask? I do not own them. I've never seen Spy Kids 1 and 2, and to be honest, you don't really need to. Sure, there's a bit of context that helps when you see the first two, but I really enjoy this one. I mean, the 3D effects, the computer-generated graphics that were so advanced for their time, all the special features. Let's put it this way, for an 8-year-old, when this came out, this was a heck of a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and I think you will as well, especially if you grew up with it. Yes, an 80s classic, Stand By Me, featuring, well, lots of big names. River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Kiefer Sutherland's in this as well. Great story, really great story. If you haven't seen Stand By Me, you should definitely watch it. It's a very heartwarming film. I think I saw it in school, actually, first time I saw Stand By Me. Okay, next up we have this, Stardust from 2007. I saw this in the cinema, and I actually quite enjoyed this. It got a lot of, like, what am I thinking of, backlash from people. I don't know why. I thought it was really good fun, really good old fun movie with a stellar cast as well. Need to watch that again sometime soon, actually. And we've got everyone's favourite franchise, it's Star Wars. And yes, I've only got the two first sets of trilogies and the bonus material. I did have Force Awakens and Rogue One, don't have those anymore. But I probably will get the sequel trilogy. I've actually been thinking of upgrading all these to Blu-ray. They've released some new sets, but I want to make sure they've got all the special features, because these are all 2-disc DVDs. So you've got Phantom Menace, which has a great documentary about how George Lucas wanted to reignite the franchise in the 90s. You've got Attack of the Clones, which I'd argue is entertaining but a bit dull in places, but still, fun movie. Then you've got my favourite Star Wars movie, Revenge of the Sith. This is the first one I saw in the cinema. I think it's a great conclusion to this trilogy, great part of the overall story. Yeah, this is just my favourite, you know, overall. Then, of course, you've got the very first one that was made. I say that, it's in the wrong order. Who put these in the wrong order? Probably me. That's the first one that was ever made, Star Wars A New Hope from 1977. Now you've got The Empire Strikes Back, which people often consider as the best one, and it is a stellar movie, to be fair. And then you've got Return of the Jedi, Part 6. And this is the bonus material. There's a great documentary in here. I think it's, you know, it's detailing the original trilogy. Really great stuff. Lots of promos in here as well. Yeah, great bonus material disc to have. Then you have Steve Jobs, which is Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs. A bit slow in places. I can see why some people may not enjoy this film. I really did, however. I thought his performance was fantastic. And you have Straight Outta Compton, again, a great film. When they announced this, when they said they were going to do a film about NWA, I didn't know how they were going to pull it off, and when I saw the runtime at like 2.5 hours, I didn't know how they were going to do that either. But it's a really good film, really shows what the scene was like back then and how these guys came up. Yeah, stellar film, highly recommended. Then you have a classic film. This is Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, one of his best films in my opinion. Really great story, really great suspense, absolute must watch if you're a Hitchcock fan. This is the 2-disc edition as well. Then you have Suffragette. Now, this film, I remember, this promoted Meryl Streep. There she is everywhere in this film. And spoiler alert, she's only in it for literally about 2 minutes. So I remember this got a lot of backlash at the time because of that, you know, that it plastered her everywhere and she's hardly in it. The film itself, though, is very good. Highly recommend. This one's a good one. This is Sully, A Miracle on the Hudson, starring Tom Hanks. This is the story of the guy who landed a plane on the Hudson River back in 2009. And this completely passed me by. I don't remember this happening, and I was 13, and you thought I would have heard of this, but yeah, really inspirational film, very passionate film, the guys who made this, so definitely recommend Sully. Then you got more Danny Boyle with Sunshine from 2007. This one always struck me how similar this was to the Doctor Who story 42. Both of them came out the same year, and both involve ships sort of plummeting towards the sun, so it's quite a coincidence, really. But this is actually a really good film for Danny Boyle, in my opinion. Not my favourite of his, but still a great film. Great performances from Cillian Murphy's in it, Chris Evans is in it, a few big names as well. Good sci-fi entry. Then you have The Sweeney. This is the remake of the classic TV series starring Ray Winstone and Ben Drew, who's also known as Plan B. And Hayley Atwell's in this too. I'd not seen the original Sweeney series, but I went to see this as a family, and I really enjoyed it. And my parents, who knew the original Sweeney series, they'd grown up on it, they really enjoyed it as well. So yeah, worthwhile follow-up, it seems. Then you have Swiss Army Man. What a weird film this is, starring Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano. The premise is Paul Dano is a guy on an island, and he makes friends with a corpse who can talk and do all this stuff, and it's just insanely bizarre, but a very entertaining film. I do enjoy this one. It's really good fun. It's worth a watch. I got some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff. I've got the original movie from 1990, probably debatably the best movie they did make of the Turtles first time around. I also have the sequel, Secret of the Ooze, which came out the following year. It's okay, it's more aimed at children, you can tell. It's not a bad film, though. Not a bad film. I don't own the third one. Don't own TMNT, the animated version. I have this, TMNT Out of the Shadows, which is the sequel to the 2014 reboot. I thought this was a great film, great fan service for Turtles fans. I don't own the original, like the 2014 one. I don't know why, but I knew I preferred this one. Shame we're probably never going to get a third part to that story, though. Now you have a weird horror, Teeth. Premise of this, how do I do this in a PG way? Basically, there is a woman who has teeth in her private area, shall we say, and hilarity ensues. A very weird film, one of those horror comedy ones. It's not a comedy, but I laugh at it. And finishing off this side, you have The Terminal, another Tom Hanks film. Tom Hanks is just great, isn't he? Just about a guy who's in an airport terminal, and somehow they managed to get a whole film out of it, but like a lot of Tom Hanks films, very heartwarming, very inspired. It's a Steven Spielberg film as well, so yeah, one of Tom Hanks' best works. Moving on to the other side, we're kicking off with The Terminator, one of my favourite films ever, one of the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. This film still holds up today. This is quite an old release of the film, but it's got 2 discs and it's got a lot of special features on it as well. But if you haven't seen The Terminator, do yourself a favour and watch it. It's basically like a horror movie, this first one, and I love it. Then you have the big one, my favourite film of all time, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This film honestly gets better and better every single time I've watched it. I've introduced countless people to the first 2 films in this series, and everyone agrees they're magnificent. This one has so much heart, so much action, so much emotion. It's just brilliant. Schwarzenegger's undoubtedly best performance, in my opinion. I do need to get this on Blu-ray or Steelbook, but yeah, my favourite film of all time. Excellent. Please watch it. And I had to have the rest of the franchise, of course. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. It's not a bad film in many ways, it's lots of fun, but they didn't need to make it. Terminator 2 wrapped things up so perfectly, and this one basically undoes a lot of the plot points in that second one, which is a great shame. But you still got Arnie in it, but yeah, it didn't need to be made. Then you've got everyone's favourite, Terminator Salvation, and this is a rental copy apparently. Yeah, this is like set in the war with the machines. There's no Arnie, you've got Christian Bale, and it's an interesting idea, but again, it just doesn't really come off as a Terminator movie, funnily enough. So yeah, pass on that one. And then you had the reboot, Terminator Genesis, from 2015. Everyone seemed to hate this. I really liked it. I mean, you had Arnie back, you had Emilia Clarke. The plot, yes, you did really have to pay attention to what was going on. There's a lot of fan service to tease 1 and 2. But yeah, I mean, it's a good film. I enjoyed this. And it's, again, they were trying to set up for a trilogy. Shame that never happened, but, you know, we'll just have to live with the one part we got. And most recently, 2019's Terminator Dark Fate, which was executively produced by James Cameron. It's the director of Deadpool. And this film is a decent return to form. Again, Arnie's back, Sarah Connor's back, the original actress, Linda Hamilton, that was the big draw. It is a good movie, better than Salvation, arguably better than Genesis as well. Not as good as 1, 2. Yeah, again, people hated this one. It does rehash a lot of things, but it's not a bad film, not by any means. I also have the TV series, that's right. In the late 2000s, just before Salvation, they made this, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. There was 2 seasons, came out in 2008 and 9, I believe, set between Terminator 2 and Terminator 3. And yeah, there's 2 full seasons of this show, and it's actually really well made. It's got Lena Headey, who went on to be in Game of Thrones, and they have Summer Glau, I think her name is, who was in Firefly. And weird though, the first season only has 9 episodes, but then season 2 has 21. So it must have done really well to get that kind of attention. But yeah, it's me and my brother watched this together, and it's a really decent series. Recommend that one. Now you got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. There's loads of them here, so we'll go through. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, brilliant 70s film. The grunginess, the low budget works in its favour. Masterpiece of horror there. 12 years later, 86, you got Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is just bonkers, and Dennis Hopper is bonkers in it. Then in 1990, you had Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Bit of a forgettable one, this one, in my opinion. Then in 94 and 95, can't remember, you had The Next Generation with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, of all people. And this one is just weird and not very good, arguably. Then in 2003, you had the reboot, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A decent reboot. It's got a few tropes of early 2000s horror, and it's nowhere near a candle on the 70s original, but not bad. And then they followed that up with Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning, which is actually a prequel to that 2003 film. This came out in 2006, and again, it's fine, but nothing groundbreaking. Then in 2013, you had, I think it was another semi-reboot, you had Texas Chainsaw. No massacre, apparently. It's not as terrifying as the original. It was just more 2010s horror fodder, in my opinion. Then the most recent film was Leatherface from 2017, which was an interesting idea, definitely. Again, nothing like masterpiece worthy, but I enjoyed it for what it's worth. That's a lot of these horror series that have many sequels. I enjoy them for what they're worth, but usually the originals are the best ones, and the sequels are just entertaining, but nothing special. I believe they're making another film for release in 2021, so I probably will check that out as well. You got some more masterpiece classic horror. This is Theatre of Blood with Vincent Price, and this is just brilliant, man. Plot about this disgruntled actor going around killing people. It's really good fun, and I'd highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't seen it. Some brilliant Vincent Price horror there. You have Their Finest, which is set during World War II, about using the realm of media to inspire people. A very heartwarming film, a very British film in that sense. Then you have The Theory of Everything, which is about Stephen Hawking, of course, where Eddie Redmayne played Stephen Hawking and won several awards for his portrayal, and probably quite rightly so for that reason as well. Moving on, you have They Live from 1988, classic John Carpenter film in the same vein as Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China. Not his best work in my opinion, but definitely fun enough. Got some Thunderbirds now. We've got the 2 Thunderbird movies from the 60s, which is Thunderbirds Are Go and Thunderbird 6. Both of which aren't that brilliant in my opinion. They're fine, but they're just sometimes they're a bit boring, which is a shame. I also have the modern Thunderbirds. I've got season 1 anyway on DVD. This is all episodes. What annoyed me about this is season 2 and 3 you can buy, but they're in 2 parts. As far as I know, you can't buy it all together, which is a bit bizarre if you ask me. And yes, I do own the original series from the 60s, but that'll be in a different part of this DVD collection. Then we have this, Thunderpants. This is a really stupid film from the early 2000s, starring Rupert Grint, just after his Harry Potter films blew up. And yeah, it's daft, very daft, but as a 6-year-old kid, it was a lot of fun. Then I got 13 Days, which centers around, at the time, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Very serious film. I watched this in A-level history because that's what we were studying. But it's very well made, very tense, and a very good film. And then you have Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magic Railroad. This is a classic film. It's one of the first films I ever saw in the cinema, actually. Diesel 10 is a terrifying character, and this film's secretly brilliant, let's all face it. And I refuse anyone who says otherwise. Secretly brilliant. Now I have George Lucas's first feature, THX 1138. This is a very weird early film for George Lucas. Very dystopian, very bizarre, but definitely worth a watch if you're into his early work. It's an interesting looking 70s filmmaking, if you ask me. They got some foreign horror, Tokyo Gore Police. This is gore, as you'd expect, non-stop. Like, if you want something mad, then you'll love Tokyo Gore Police. Next up we have Top Gun, one of the quintessential 80s movies. It's a 2-disc edition. The sequel will come out eventually, and yeah, the soundtrack is arguably better than the film, in my opinion. And we have Total Recall, another Schwarzenegger film. Not his best film, in my opinion, but definitely a very visually interesting film, and definitely better than the remake they did with Colin Farrell. You have Touching the Void, which is about people stuck up a snowy mountain. All I'll say is watch it. Very powerful. Watched it in school, but very powerful film. You have The Toy Shop, which is sort of like discount Disney. This was made in the mid-90s. It's only 40 minutes. It barely qualifies as a feature film, and it's clearly riffing off the whole Toy Story thing. But I grew up with this on tape, and it's not bad. You've got to give it a chance. And the original Trainspotting, one of Danny Boyle's most recognisable films. Yeah, this film is messed up, but in the best way. I do own the sequel, but that'll be in a different part because I have it on a steelbook. And I think this is better, but yeah, if you haven't seen Trainspotting, if you're in the mood for it, give it a watch. I say it'll be in a different part. It's actually right here. Here it is, T2 Trainspotting on Blu-ray Steelbook, no less. This came out 20 years after the original. A lot of people thought it wouldn't be any good, but it's actually a very competent sequel, one of the best sequels there is. T1 is still better, but for what it's worth, T2 is a decent follow-up. And the last film we've got is another Danny Boyle film, coincidentally enough. This is Trance. This came out in 2013, and this is one of those mind-bending films, a la Inception type, and a lot of people didn't like this. I'd say if you're watching it and you're really paying attention to what's going on, you will enjoy it. Lots of mind-bending, lots of fun plot twists. Oh, this film. A really funny comedy. Obviously, there's Robert Downey Jr. doing blackface as like a pastiche. Is it okay? It's extremely debatable, but I remember enjoying this when it first came out. So we've got the first of the Unbreakable trilogy here, which is simply titled, well, Unbreakable. This came out in the year 2000, and it was followed by Split and then Glass. And it's a really good first part, although, again, watching it, you'd never think it was going to become like a 3-part series, if you like. Well, I certainly didn't at the time. Now we have this, A United Kingdom, which is a really sweet film set in the late 1940s. One of those quintessential, like, British films, like Their Finest is and that sort of stuff, but a very good film nonetheless. Next we have Dracula, the Legacy Collection from Universal. This was really cool. This is all of the, or at least most of the Universal Dracula films from the 30s and 40s on here, and they've made them excruciatingly hard to read. So you've got Dracula, Dracula's Daughter, Son of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, which Dracula featured, and House of Dracula. The only thing they don't have on this is Abbott and Costello Meet Dracula, which was more of a comedy. I believe it is on the Blu-ray version, so why they went for the Blu-ray and not the DVD is a bit bizarre, and it doesn't come in a nice slipcase like some of the others do, but, you know, I enjoy the classic Universal stuff, so it's nice to have Dracula in the collection, followed by Frankenstein, the Legacy Collection. So this contains 7 films, would you believe? 7 films from that golden era, and those 7 films are a bit easier for me to read here. So those 7 films are Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, Son of Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, and House of Dracula. Some of them do overlap, as you've probably guessed, mainly the house ones, because they were like ensemble pieces, including the Mummy Legacy Collection. Now, if you remember from a previous part, I have the very original Mummy from 1932. This does contain that, as well as 5 other films from the original Legacy. And those 5 other films in question are The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. So one of the Abbott and Costellos did make its way on here, at least. So, yeah, the Mummy films, I'm very much of the opinion the first one is the best, and the rest are a bit rubbish, quite frankly, but that's just me. Now, you've got the Wolfman Legacy Collection, which has 6 films in it, spanning from 1935 to 46. Funnily enough, you've got The Wolfman First, which is 1941, the classic. You've got Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. You've got House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, all crossovers. Then you've got Werewolf of London, which actually preceded the Wolfman. Werewolf of London came out in 1935, and then there was also She-Wolf of London, which is not a very good film. Fair to say the Wolfman from 1941 with Lon Chaney Jr. is the one you should definitely go for if you're interested. And then I got these two recently. I didn't know they'd done sets for these, but you have the Invisible Man Legacy Collection. There was the reboot this year, but this has a few films on it. You've got The Invisible Man, The Invisible Man Returns, The Invisible Woman, The Invisible Agent, The Invisible Man's Revenge, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. So another Abbott and Costello. So yeah, that was a good collection to sift through. And you have this one, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Now, there's only 3 films in this set, definitely the least amount of films in one set. And yes, the creature is iconic. I'm amazed it got its own legacy release, considering there's only 3 films. And those 3 films are simply Creature from the Black Lagoon, the original, Revenge of the Creature, and The Creature Walks Among Us. And the first two films were originally done in 3D. This DVD doesn't contain those versions, but there are releases where you can get it on 3D. Moving on over here, you've got a DVD steelbook. This is The Verdict, starring Paul Newman. This is a really excellent film. I'd never heard much about it, but it's a great sort of courtroom drama sort of thing. So if you're into courtroom dramas, you will enjoy The Verdict. Now we've got some more horror. We've got VHS. Oh yes, I remember this was sort of talked about a lot when it came out back in 2012. It's sort of a horror compilation series where when the main protagonist put a different tape in, they get a different horror story. Really cool idea for a film series, actually. It had a few sequels. Here's VHS 2, which was really messed up from what I remember, more so than the first. Then you had VHS Viral, which I've only seen once, and if I'm honest, I don't remember it being as good as the others. I don't think they made any more. They have this one, The Walk, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt. This was about a guy who, when the Twin Towers still stood, he did a tightrope walk between them. And it's quite a remarkable film, actually. Probably one of those you watch once and then that's it. But, you know, it was a fun film nonetheless. They've got a true sci-fi classic. You have The War of the Worlds. This is the 1950s version, not the debatable Tom Cruise 2000s version. And this film still holds up really well. Like, it's really well made. There's a lot of impact to it. The effects are great for the time. If you want a definitive War of the Worlds, I'd go for that version. Then you have The Warriors, the definitive ultimate director's cut or whatever. This is a classic 70s like gang film, gangs in New York. It's really gritty and really cool. Some places outdated, but yeah, a very cool film to have. So if you like that sort of style, you'll like The Warriors. More steelbooks now. We have We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is a very interesting, quirky film starring names like Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly and Ezra Miller as the titular Kevin. It's about a mother whose son is basically, well, really weird for want of a better word, and lots of bad stuff happens, and, well, we need to talk about Kevin. It's an artificial eye release, and yeah, if you're into like independent, quirky stuff, then I think you'll get something out of this film in particular. Now we have Westworld. No, not the glossy TV show. This is the original film from the 1970s. I think similar premise, you know, vacation, destination, but everyone's a robot pretty much and things go haywire. Of course, there was a sequel, Future World, which I have elsewhere on the shelf, but you know what? Despite its age, this film actually holds up somewhat decently well, to some degree anyway. So before you check out the TV show, maybe check out where the whole thing came from. Now, I watched this recently. This is Whiplash, starring Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons, the story of a young drummer who wants to be the best, and J.K. Simmons, his character, has debatable methods of trying to get him to that level, but a very powerful film about what musicians can potentially go through to try and achieve what they want, but great performances all around, so I'd recommend Whiplash. And then we have, one of the true classics. We have Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. This is the 1971 adaptation of the Roald Dahl book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and of course it has Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. Now, I have seen the 2005 Tim Burton version. That version's okay, but this is the true classic. This is one of my all-time classic films. I remember watching it as a kid, and it just has so much charm, so much fun to it, and it holds up really well, so I had to have that on DVD, of course. Another true classic, this is The Wizard of Oz. Now, this is the 3-disc collector's edition. There's so much on here. First of all, classic film from the late 1930s starring Judy Garland as Dorothy. I mean, I think everyone's seen The Wizard of Oz, or the vast majority of people. This version's really cool because it has so many extras, so many bonus features, and I'm all for good bonus features. But there are so many like Wizard of Oz sets you can get as well, so it's really up to you. You've got to check out the special features, but if you haven't seen Wizard of Oz, I think you need to check yourself and go and watch it. Alright, moving towards the end of this side, we've got a Blu-ray. It's The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio. This was a recent purchase. I realised I actually didn't own it on DVD, so I thought I'd get it on Blu-ray because it was cheap. Wonderful film. This is the film that should have won Leo his Best Actor Oscar, not necessarily The Revenant, but an excellent film, Wolf of Wall Street. And I believe the film with the most instances of the F-word in it as well. Now we have Yesterday, a fun Danny Boyle film, which is about this guy here who wakes up one day and no one remembers who the Beatles are apart from him. Very light entertainment story. Again, very surprising for a Danny Boyle sort of film, but again, very well made film indeed. Now I've got some Yu-Gi-Oh! My pastime. So you've got Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, which was 2004, which was, I think, designed with Western audiences in mind, and it misses in a few places, but it's fun enough. Then you have Yu-Gi-Oh! Bonds Beyond Time, which was sort of the 10th anniversary of the anime itself. So you have the crossover of the three leads at the time, which is Yugi from the original series, Jaden from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and Yusei Fudo from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Again, bit of fun, not like anything of too high a quality. This film, on the other hand, I love. This is Yu-Gi-Oh! The Dark Side of Dimensions. This was to commemorate 20 years of the franchise as a whole in 2016. And this was a wonderful film. I saw this when it had a limited release over here, dubbed into English, and it's absolutely sublime. Like, I love it to pieces. Best Yu-Gi-Oh! Film there has been, in my opinion. Great way to celebrate the franchise as well. So yes, absolutely, if you're a fan, check out The Dark Side of Dimensions. We have a Blu-ray steelbook, this one. This is Zombieland, classic film from 2009. Just a big laugh, really. I know it's horror, but it's also got a good laugh. I haven't seen the sequel, Double Tap. I've heard it's meant to be somewhat decent, so I do need to see it, but yeah, Zombieland is a good one to have, and nice to have on steelbook too. Now to finish, we have some compilations. Here is a 5 horror compilation, definitely public domain, starring such gems as The Terror, Zombie, The Hitchhiker, The Bat, and House on Haunted Hill. Now to be fair, The Hitchhiker was a big surprise. I really enjoyed that one. House on Haunted Hill is equally good. The rest, I could arguably pass, but you know, 5 stories, I got it for like 20 pence or something. You got a 3-pack here, which is like a family pack. You've got The Grinch That Stole Christmas, great film with Jim Carrey. You've got Nanny McPhee, which is a nice film with Emma Thompson, and you have the 2003 version of Peter Pan, where everyone thought that this guy was fit when we were like 6 or 7. You know, 3 good films to have, I'd argue. And last but not least on the shelf, we have another 3-pack, I think family-orientated as well, with the Thunderbirds movie. The less said about that, the better. Small Soldiers, which is a film I remember from my childhood, really fun film. And We're Back, a dinosaur story, which a lot of people don't really talk about, but I used to really enjoy that one. Quite dark in places as well, but yeah, very fun film. So, highly recommend 2 out of those 3. So I think it only makes sense that we'll start over here. So we will start with this beast. This is Bond 50, the 50th anniversary of Bond box set. So this came out in 2012. I got it early 2013. And at the time it had every single James Bond film on it. See, 50 years. And I used to have the... Oh no, they are on the bottom. I used to have the insert, but I don't anymore. So this contains every film from Dr. No in 1962 up until Quantum of Solace, but there was a space reserved for Skyfall in there, so if you give me a jump cut, I will take this out and show you what's inside. Ooh, that's a big behemoth. So there's all the discs, they're all in stacks of 2 there, and there's my Skyfall disc. They left that space open for you, which was very considerate. Big James Bond fan, really enjoy it. In fact, we'll just take you through. So Dr. No, great film to start with, From Russia with Love. Goldfinger, one of my favourites, Thunderball, which I think is a bit dull. You Only Live Twice, contender for my favourite Bond film, it was for a long time. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a good film, just a shame George Lazenby isn't Sean Connery, bless him. Diamonds Are Forever, not the best way to finish with Connery. Live and Let Die, starter Roger Moore. Man with the Golden Gun, my favourite Roger Moore one. The Spy Who Loved Me is there as well. And you've got Moonraker, which isn't as bad as everyone says, and For Your Eyes Only. Octopussy and A View to a Kill. Then you're getting into Dalton with The Living Daylights and License to Kill, which isn't as bad as everyone says. Pierce Brosnan now, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies. You have The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day, which is horrific. Casino Royale, my favourite Bond film, and Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall there. So this has 23 Bond films when you add Skyfall, so a great set. So that's Bond 50, and I'll just say now, I'm not going to unbox all of these, because some of them you can tell just by looking at the main box, it's not worth it. For that one, I felt it was worth it, though. Now we have some Alfred Hitchcock over here. This is the Alfred Hitchcock collection that was released in 2005, I think, and it contains a good 14 films on here. Ah, there you go. So you've got The Bird, you've got Family Plot, Frenzy, The Man Who Knew Too Much, Marnie, Rear Window, Saboteur, Shadow of a Doubt, Topaz, Torn Curtain, The Trouble with Harry, Rope, Vertigo, Psycho, and a Psycho bonus disc. So really cool to have so many of Hitchcock's films on one release. Obviously Hitchcock made several films for different companies, so some big ones aren't on there like Strangers on a Train or Dial M for Murder. I'm guessing these are all the ones still owned by Universal, but I'd say if you want like a quintessential Alfred Hitchcock set, then that's a good one to go for. You got some Baz Luhrmann here now. This is the Red Curtain trilogy, as it was known. So 3 Baz Luhrmann films. So you got Moulin Rouge, which is excellent. His version of Romeo and Juliet, which I think holds up pretty well. And Strictly Ballroom, which I haven't actually watched yet, funnily enough. And you've got the Behind the Red Curtain, which is a behind-the-scenes thing. This box set is quite cheap, so if you enjoy those films or you want to get into them, you can find it quite easily. Here's one for you horror fans. Here we have George A. Romero's Box of the Dead. That's right, this is the horror master himself and some of his zombie films. Now it contains the original Night of the Living Dead, it has Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, and Diary of the Dead, so all the way up until 2007. It doesn't contain the 2009-10 film Survival of the Dead, but I did have that for a time, and it wasn't very good, so I haven't held on to it. But yeah, if you want a true Romero box set, you need to get the Box of the Dead. Now some old-fashioned things. We've got the Carry On collection. I actually got this during the lockdown and watched them all. And these films, are they outdated? Yes. But I guess they have a certain British charm about them. I mean, they were famous, for anyone who doesn't know. There are 30 of these, by the way, made between 1958 and 1978, so in 20 years, and they were known for their ensemble cast. So you had main stars like Sid James and Kenneth Williams, Charles Hawtrey, Barbara Windsor, Hattie Jakes, Bernard Bresslaw, amongst others. And they're just very British films of the era, so maybe not for sensitive audiences nowadays, but as a good old-fashioned charm, it was nice to finally watch all the Carry-Ons, because I'd heard a lot about them. Now we have some classic sci-fi on here, which it was a box that I remember wanting for ages. It's got 7 films, I think, all by Universal. You've got Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Incredible Shrinking Man, This Island Earth, Tarantula, The Thing from Another World, It Came from Outer Space, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And the majority of these, see they come in those little sleeves there, the majority of these are quite good. Creature is obviously classic. The Thing, again, brilliant 50s film. Some of these are a bit schlock, like I wasn't really much of a fan of This Island Earth and Tarantula, for example. But The Incredible Shrinking Man, that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. A wonderful film with some great effects for the late 1950s, so there's definitely many films to enjoy on there. I'm going to put that this way around. So that was a good box set to own. Now this is one of a series of box sets from 20th Century Fox. This is the 20th Century Fox Presents the Fantastic Classics. So you've got 5 films. You've got The Day the Earth Stood Still, Fantastic Voyage, The Fly, Journey to the Centre of the Earth, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Now, there were a few of these box sets released with different themes. I had a few, but never watched them, so I chucked them in. But I kept this one because these films are brilliant. I mean, The Day the Earth Stood Still is like a 50s masterpiece, as is The Fly, to be fair, the original Fly. Fantastic Voyage is a great example of old school effects, if you like. Journey to the Centre of the Earth is a good adventure. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is also a fun submariner story. So there's 5 really good films on here. So if you're into this sort of sci-fi, horror-y, action stuff, you'll like that box set. Now we have the Indiana Jones, or the Adventures of Indiana Jones, should I say, in widescreen. Hooray! This was released before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, so you'll notice there is only Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, The Last Crusade, and bonus material. And I don't really mind. I'm not precious about owning Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, as many people aren't. Now we've got the MCU. Now I've actually reviewed all of these in their own individual videos over the years, so if you want a more in-depth analysis, a pure unboxing, you can check those out. But this is the MCU so far. So you've got Phase 1, which has everything from the first Iron Man to the first Avengers. You have Phase 2, which has everything from Iron Man 3 up until Ant-Man. You have Phase 3 Part 1, because there was a lot of films here, kicking off with Captain America Civil War and finishing with Thor Ragnarok. And to finish, you have Phase 3 Part 2, which starts with Black Panther and finishes with Spider-Man Far From Home. So it's nice that we can own the MCU so far in these really nice, like, compact box sets. Obviously, Season 4's kickoff has been a bit delayed with the whole pandemic thing, but I'm certain if they want to keep with the organisation anyway, that they will keep to making these box sets. And if they don't, at least we've got the whole sort of first era on here. Now we've got Rocky, the Rocky Collection. This is quite an old box set. I think you can get newer sets, but this was cool to own. So you've got all 6 movies, including Rocky Balboa, which was the new one at the time. So Rockies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Rocky Balboa. And these films are good fun. The first one's an excellent movie, undoubtedly the best. 2 and 3 are just like fun schlock. 4's really fun for its 80s-ness. 5's a bit And Balboa was a decent return to form, but really, if you just want to watch one, just stick to the first one. Now I've got my favourite horror franchise, Saw. This is the final cut, as it says, the limited edition Saw box set. All 7 films. Game over. That title's slightly redundant now that we have Jigsaw out as well, but at the time, this had all 7 of the Saw films. Of the most successful horror franchise of all time. In terms of gross it was. I don't know if that's still the case now, but yeah, these 7 films were big back in the day, and it's nice to have them all on one neat little box set. Now you've got Silent Classics. This is an interesting set. I think you can tell it's a public domain set and release. I mean, all 5 of these films are now in the public domain. You've got The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Der Golem, and Nosferatu. And the thing is, a lot of these releases, or these versions of these films, are all from the 20s. Of course, the silent era. So I know Caligari is 1920, and some are even earlier, I think. But yeah, if you like silent film, that's a good set to have. Quite cheap as well. Now we've got the original series of Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is what the Blue Eyes was in front of. And for some reason, they've got this nice thing of Exodia, but it's back to front. So you think this is Season 1, but actually Season 5 is here. So you've got Season 5, Season 4, the Orichalcos season, low-key best season, don't at me. Season 3, you got Season 2, which is the Battle City tournament. And Season 1, which of course is Duelist Kingdom. I love the original series of Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, I grew up playing the card game. GX isn't bad as well. I'm tempted to get GX. The 3 seasons of that are on DVD. Although, annoyingly, Season 4 was never dubbed into English, so we'll have to pass on that one. But yeah, nice to own the set. Getting near the end now, we'll finish with some Jerry Anderson. I'm a big fan of his. Got his 4 Feather Falls series, which was the first Super Marionation set. It was like a western starring Tex Tucker. Really short, but, you know, very charming of 1960. Then 1961, you've got Supercar, which is more in keeping with, like, you know, the Thunderbird style. Still in black and white, still a bit dated to some extent, but this is one of the first major shows he did. This is a network release. A lot of these are network releases. It was so hard to get these at one point, but I was lucky enough to find these at a car boot sale for a good price. So it's nice to own the complete series of Supercar. Also the complete series of Fireball XL5, which came in 1962. Starring robots and what is that, Zuni? Yeah, Zuni. Again, you can see each series gets better if you watch them in the year they came out. This was still in black and white as well. Now you have Stingray, which came out in 64, the first one in colour and mainly underwater based. I wasn't a bigger fan of this one as some of the others, but I know it has a loyal fan base. Now here's the big one, the one everyone remembers. It's Thunderbirds, and indeed this was one of the first programs I remember watching as a kid. I was about 4 years old when I discovered Thunderbirds, and it's really cool with all the different ships and the situations they're in. It's just a really cool set, and it's also got it's got a documentary on there, lots of special features, and all the episodes. And these are ITV releases now. Speaking of ITV release, here's Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, which is a really good and a lot darker series for Jerry Anderson. It's probably a second favourite of mine behind Thunderbirds, but if you haven't seen it in a while, check it out. I think it gets not as nearly as much praise as it should. Another ITV release, we've got Joe 90, which was about this boy who's a secret agent, and he can do different things when he's plugged into this machine. This show's okay. I wasn't too much of a fan of this one. Back to network releasing, this is The Secret Service, which only had 13 episodes, was a mix of puppets and live action, and not a lot of people like this one. And I can see why. So that's fair enough. And my last Anderson thing at the minute is this, UFO, which was their first fully live action series. It was more of a drama, and it has all episodes on there. There's quite a lot of episodes, actually. I haven't watched this yet. I do need to start watching it, but I am quite excited for it, as this was 1970. I don't own Space 1999 yet, or indeed Terrorhawks, which I know are Anderson related, but hopefully I'll add those later to sort of complete the set. And the last thing we'll look at, the Michael Jackson stuff we'll leave for now, is this, the Hammer Collection. This is a 21-disc collector's set of Harahama films. I can't say it. Of Hammer horror films. And I have looked at this in a very old video, which I'll have to link. So they come in these little packs here, and there's 21 films of Hammer horror films. I can't say Hammer horror. But yeah, I'll leave a link. I'll use a card up there, which connects to a very old video where I look at this more in depth. So we're starting with my Disney Animated Classics collection. Now a lot of you will already remember that I did a video on this a long time ago. In fact, a time when the newest one I think was Zootropolis, I think. So not much has changed, but so I'll breeze through these quickly. I'll leave a link, I'll put a card on screen now, you can check out that old video. It still holds up pretty well. So Animated Classic number 1 is Snow White from 1937. Wonderful, wonderful way to kick things off. Pinocchio from 1940, another classic. A lot of these I watched as a kid, you see. Fantasia from 1940 as well, and probably one of the best Disney animated classics of all time. Don't at me. Like, this is just such a wonderful film, and I hope more people appreciate it. We have Dumbo from 1941. Again, wonderful film. The Tim Burton version apparently is not very good. 1942, we have Bambi. This film I didn't really get as a kid, but as I got older, I started to appreciate it a lot more for its animation and the story as well. Now you've got some of the package films, like Saludos Amigos from 1943 or 4. Basically, the package films were either like shorts compiled together. This one is really weird because it's only about 40 minutes, and there's a lot of live-action footage as well. It's almost like more of a documentary on, you know, Mexican culture, or, you know, so it's odd that they always considered this a classic. The next one of which is The Three Caballeros, a sort of pseudo-sequel to Saludos Amigos, and one I used to treasure fondly as a kid. You've got Make My Music, which is probably the best of these package films. This is 10 short films compiled together, and they are truly wonderful. Like, there's some really excellent features directed, I say features, shorts directed in here. So the best one, if you're only going to pick one, go with Make My Music. Then you've got Fun and Fancy Free, which is only 2 package films, but, you know, one of them's like Mickey and the Beanstalk, take on Jack and the Beanstalk, so that's got a lot of charm to it. You've got Melody Time, which is the closest in vein to Make My Music, although there's only 5 shorts in this one. It's not as good, but there's still some wonderful sequences in there. Then coming to the end of the 40s, you've got The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which is one story, you know, about Mr. Toad from Wind in the Willows, and the other story is about the, is it the Headless Horseman, like the Highwayman, that sort of thing. Into the 50s, with 1950, you have Cinderella, one of the true Disney classics, and this was one I didn't watch as a kid, but, you know, I got appreciation for as I got older. 51, you've got Alice in Wonderland, again, a true classic, great animation, great visuals, just go and see that one, ignore the remakes. 1953, you've got Peter Pan, one of my favourites as a kid, you know, wonderful story, I think we all know it. It's mad that it's so long ago, 53, like, it doesn't feel like it's aged. Well, it has aged poorly in places, I mean, the Native Americans for one. But yeah, wonderful film nonetheless. Then you've got Lady and the Tramp from 1955, again, a really simple, wonderful Disney film. Of course, these were being made when Walt Disney himself was still around. Then you've got Sleeping Beauty from 1959, a film that I think Walt thought was going to break boundaries like Snow White did. And sadly, it didn't do that, and I'd actually argue it's one of the dullest Disney films. But that's, you know, that's all just a matter of opinion. Some people love it. Then you have 101 Dalmatians from 1961. Now, this is one of the rare occurrences where I prefer the live-action remake from 1996 with Glenn Close. Probably because I watched that one first, and this one's still alright, but I don't know what it is. The 96 version, I think, is just better. Now you've got Sword in the Stone from 1963. Now, I grew up on this, right? And a lot of people don't know about this film. They don't know it's a Disney film. They don't even know it exists. Please, I implore you, if you haven't seen it, go and watch Sword in the Stone. You will not regret it at all. Then you've got the classic Jungle Book from 1967. Everyone knows this one. You know, the songs, the characters, the remake. Oh, Christopher Walken singing. We'll get to that. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful film. You've got the Aristocats from 1970. Again, an underrated one. A lot of people think this one isn't very good, but those people are wrong. I'm just joking. No, again, I grew up on the Aristocats. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Another one I grew up on was Robin Hood from 1973, one of my favourite Disney animated classics ever, and I mean that like top 5. This film is just so rewatchable. Cover's a bit damaged, which is a shame, but yeah, this has always been one of my favourites. Always, always, always. Then you've got The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which was basically, I think, 3 Winnie the Pooh shorts, originally released in the 60s, compiled into a feature release in 1977, and it's fine, you know, it's Winnie the Pooh. We all love Winnie the Pooh. Released that same year, in 77, you have The Rescuers. Now, a lot of people might remember The Rescuers Down Under, and this one is good. It's, you know, the original Rescuers. There's a lot of defining moments. I'd argue Rescuers Down Under is the superior film, but that does not mean you should ignore this one at all. Now we have The Fox and the Hound from 1981, and this was a film I didn't watch for a very long time, but when I did, I mean, it almost broke me. It's such a sad... Well, it's not sad all the way through, but you know what I mean? It has a lot of emotional beats, so you should definitely check out that one. Now this one, The Black Cauldron from 1985, a lot of people hate this one. In fact, this nearly broke Disney as a studio. It didn't do very well at the box office, and some people say it's not that good. It's very dark for a Disney film, and I only watched it this year during the lockdown. And for what it is, like, the art style's really good. I can appreciate a lot about it, but I can see why a lot of people also don't like it. Funnily enough, initially when I started getting these DVDs about 4 or 5 years ago, this was the last one I needed to complete my collection, and so I did. Then you've got The Great Mouse Detective from 1986. Again, a wonderful film. Or Basil and the Great Mouse Detective, as it's called over here. Why people don't talk about this more often is beyond me. It's superb, brilliant. Oliver and Company from 1988. Again, I think an underrated one. A lot of people don't give this one credit. It's not the greatest Disney film ever, not by any stretch of the imagination, but there's still a lot to love about it. Then you have The Little Mermaid from 1989, which for a lot of people kicked off what's known as the Disney Renaissance, where they just had a string of successful films back to back, this being the first one of them. Admittedly, it's not one of my favourites, but again, I think that's just because I didn't grow up with it, not myself. But it's a good movie, don't get me wrong. Then you've got The Rescuers Down Under. Oh, there's that film again. Yeah, this came out in 1990 and is much better than the first Rescuers. And it's just a wonderful little story. Shame it sort of got lost in the pantheon of all these other films, including Beauty and the Beast, which is a contender for my favourite Disney film ever. It's always battling with The Lion King, but this is definitely up there. I mean, we all know this one, Tale as Old as Time. I'm going to use that reference. A timeless story, brilliant characters, brilliant songs, just lovely, lovely film. Then you've got Aladdin from 1992. Now, I didn't grow up with this one, funnily enough, and it is a fun movie, but I don't have the same affection for it as a lot of other people do. Doesn't mean it's bad, just didn't grow up with it. Then you have The Lion King, my other favourite contender, released in 1994. I mean, what else is there to say, man? It's The Lion King. Everyone loves The Lion King. So, yeah, just watch The Lion King. Better than the remake, we'll get to that. You got Pocahontas from 1995. I guess, like, a lot of people like this one. I think it's okay, but I think this is the first blip in the Disney Renaissance. It was a success, but I don't think it was as successful as some people make it out to be. You've got The Hunchback of Notre Dame from 1996, a wonderful, like, Gothic-era Disney film. Doesn't get as much credit as it deserves. If they remake this in live action, they need to do it justice, absolutely. And cast Peter Capaldi as Frollo. I think that'd be a great choice. Now you've got Hercules from 1997. I love this film. Grew up on it. Brilliant songs, brilliant cast. James Wood as Hades is fantastic. Some people don't like it. They think it cheapens the mythos, but it's a good bit of fun, man. Just, you know, calm down, calm down. You got Mulan from 1998. I haven't seen the recent version because I'm not paying £20 for the privilege on Disney+. But the original is, you know, an iconic film for what it is. Some people argue it's dated in some places, and they may be correct, but still a fun time. And then the film that a lot of people say closed out the Disney Renaissance is this, Tarzan from 1999. And that's probably true in terms of box office success. This one did really well. The Phil Collins soundtrack is amazing. I don't care what anyone says. And again, wonderful animation, great adaptation of the Tarzan story. Yeah, essential viewing if you're a Disney fan. Now, moving into the 2000s, you kick off with Fantasia 2000, which is a, you know, sequel to Fantasia 60 years later. I haven't seen this one yet, funnily enough. I haven't got round to watching it. I do need to, though. But if it's anything like the first Fantasia, I know I'm going to love it. Now you have The Emperor's New Groove, also released in 2000. Again, I think this got a lot of negative criticism at the time. I think now it holds up really well. There's a lot of affinity for it. It's 20 years old now, after all, which is mad. But yeah, really fun movie. Very simple movie, but also very fun. 2001, you've got Atlantis, The Lost Empire. This film is okay. I don't go back to it often because it's not the best Disney film ever. I could see where they wanted to go with it, but a lot of missed potential, I think, with that one. Now, also in my top 5 is Lilo and Stitch. Oh, this film, what can you say about this film, man? It's gorgeous, beautiful story, really endearing characters. I mean, they released enough sequels and TV shows, so yeah, always, always, always will love Lilo and Stitch. Now, also in my top 5, I think I've nearly filled it out, is this one, Treasure Planet from 2002. I saw this in the cinema, I fell in love, I've had it on DVD, I've got it here in this DVD. It's mine and my girlfriend's, like, Disney film to watch together. It's just a gorgeous film, really wonderful, and more people need to talk about Treasure Planet, man. They really do. 2003, you have Brother Bear. And again, this is when I started seeing them in the cinema. Really enjoyed this one. It gets a lot of like backlash, but I really like it. I haven't seen the sequel though. Now this is in the top 10 at least. Home on the Range. Everyone hates Home on the Range. I don't know why. come on, Judi Dench is a cow in it, man. What's not to love? I think this film's really endearing. It's got a lot of heart, a lot of promise. Not the best Disney film ever, but Pete, give Home on the Range a second chance, I beg you. You got Chicken Little from 2005. This is when they started going the 3D animated route. It's their first one. It's not brilliant, but, you know, cut them some slack. It was their first one. Now you've got this oddity, The Wild, which came out in 2006, and this came out sort of after Madagascar, so it almost feels like, I'm sure it wasn't the intention, but it does feel like Disney was almost trying to ride off that Madagascar trend, and it's okay, it's not like wonderful, but it's fine. You got Meet the Robinsons from 2007, and a lot of people say I look like this kid, which, you know, is valid. Again, it's fine, I don't mind it, a lot of people don't like it, take it or leave it. Moving on to the last few on this side of the shelf, you've got Bolt from 2008. Yeah, fine. I wasn't really enamored, but a lot of people like it. You have Princess and the Frog, of course, featuring the first black Disney princess, Princess Tiana from 2009. And yeah, this film's great. Return to 2D animation style, great songs. Just watch this again. You'll like it. And then back to 3D with Tangled. This is what some people are saying started the second Disney Golden Age, their 50th animated feature. Rapunzel's great, Flynn Rider's great, songs are great. One of the best Disney princess movies, I would argue. Now we're moving on down here to finish off the animated classics with Wreck-It Ralph from 2012. A video game movie at its peak. Best video game movie ever, even though it's not based off an actual game. Just a lot of love for video games in general. Great characters, great story. Highly recommend that. Now the big one, it's Frozen from 2013. What is there to say about Frozen that already hasn't been said, man? I mean, people love it, the songs are iconic, the characters are iconic. Not the best film ever, but a very good one nonetheless. Now you have Big Hero 6, which got overlooked massively. Like, I think this film's wonderful, it's got a lot of heart to it, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth the buy, honestly, you won't be disappointed. Zootropolis from 2016, known as Zootopia elsewhere. Again, another surefire hit for Disney. Great story, a lot of great themes about, you know, anti-racism and stuff. Just a wonderful, wonderful film. All the family can enjoy it. So yeah, watch Zootropolis if you haven't already. You've got Moana, again, another big hit. Dwayne The Rock Johnson is surprisingly great as Maui. And the story's great, the songs are great. I find I say that a lot, but it's true. Wonderful, wonderful film. If you saw it in the cinema, the water effects, oh my god, gorgeous. Now you have Ralph Breaks the Internet from 2018. This was a fine sequel, don't get me wrong, but definitely not as clever or as timeless as the original Wreck-It Ralph. If I could only pick one to keep forever, definitely keep the first one. This one you could do without it if you want. And of course the latest sequel, Frozen 2, which only recently got this slipcover treatment. I love this film. I saw it in the cinema, and the songs, I prefer the soundtrack to the first one, I prefer the story to the first one. This feels a lot more mature than the first one, and I just think it's a superior film. I don't care what anyone says, it is the better film. So that brings us up to date with the Disney animated classics. They've released 57 in over 80 years, and now we shall move on to Pixar. We'll save the live action stuff for next time, because this video is already getting long enough, but now let's dive into Pixar. Again, I've already done a video on these before, which I'll put a card in the description if you want to see it. But we'll kick off with Toy Story from 1995. The one that started it all for Pixar. Really wonderful. Yes, some of the computer effects don't hold up, but give them credit, it was nearly 30 years ago. My favourite Pixar film, don't at me, is A Bug's Life from 1998. I don't know what it is. I grew up with this one. I just think it's brilliant. The writing's brilliant. The cast, everything about it. It's just my favourite Pixar film. So after that, you have Toy Story 2, which a lot of people say is the magnum opus of the Toy Story franchise, and they're probably right. It is probably the best out of the Toy Story films, debatable with 3. Yeah, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm sure all of you have seen it by now. Monsters, Inc., another surefire hit. I saw this in the cinema. It was the first film I saw in the cinema twice as a kid, and I love it. It's so timeless. I watched it recently, again, for the upteenth time. A lot of Pixar stuff you can just go back and rewatch instantly. So yeah, highly recommend that. Number 5 is Finding Nemo. Again, another hit. Great film. Everyone loves it. The family loves it. Iconic characters. I mean, Dory, for one, as an example. But yeah, Finding Nemo is another hit. They continued that hit streak for a 6th time with The Incredibles. A great sort of pastiche homage to like superhero tropes of the 50s and 60s. Wonderful story. Really great animation. Original ideas and relatable characters. Yeah, The Incredibles is great. You have Cars. I will always defend this movie. A lot of people don't like Cars as a franchise. I think the first Cars is actually a really good movie. It's another hit in my eyes. The sequels, we'll get to those. But yeah, I'll always love that first Cars film. Another hit is Ratatouille from 2007. A lot of people consider this as Pixar's greatest film recently. I've noticed that in YouTube reviews. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, but it is another winner for them, and I recommend it if you haven't seen it. Then you have WALL-E from 2008. Again, another surefire hit, talking us of the dangers of, you know, destroying our environment. A conversation very relevant now, to be honest. I think we all need to go back and watch WALL-E and make sure we don't end up like that. You have Up from 2009, another winner. They had 10 winners at this point, yes, Cars included. And this was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. That's how big this was, man. And I mean, I'm surprised it's the kid on the front cover as opposed to, you know, Carl or The House or whatever. But yeah, wonderful film. Highly recommended. Don't make a sequel, Pixar, for goodness sake. Toy Story 3 from 2010. Some people say this is the best one. It was definitely a great way to round off the series. And I see you in the corner, Toy Story 4. We'll get to you. But yeah, this was a great way to end the series, and it's a great film all on its own. It holds up. Now you've got Cars 2. This was Pixar's first dud, in my opinion. It just does not work. The whole mate as a spy car thing. The fact Mater was the centre of the film as well. No, just pass on this one. If you're going to skip any, pass on Cars 2. You've got Brave from 2012. This was sort of Pixar's attempt at having their own Disney-esque princess style. It was sort of well received. A lot of people relate to Merida and her Scottishness, but some people don't like it. I think it's fine. It's a winner in my eyes, but I know not everyone thinks like that. Story number 14 is Monsters University. Like a lot of people, I was amazed they went down the prequel route as opposed to a straight-up sequel that people were asking for. Having said that, I think it's completely fine as it is. It's a great prequel, a great introduction to Mike and Sully's relationship, and I had a lot of fun with it. I don't get why people dog on this one, really. You've got Inside Out from 2015, a great story about our emotions and how we deal with them, especially from the point of view of a child. This one just has so much heart in it, and it will make you cry. It will, I promise. There's debates about are they going to make a sequel. I kind of don't want them to, but I mean, it's Pixar, they'll do anything. You have The Good Dinosaur from the same year, 2015, and this, some people say, it's up for debate whether this was a hit or miss or not. I mean, I think compared to their other work, it's a miss, but it's not a bad film. It's just for Pixar, it's a very simple, but almost to the point of being basic film, if that makes sense. And I can see why a lot of people consider it as a miss. You've got Finding Dory, the sequel that people were surprised at. I mean, how could you really make a sequel to Finding Nemo about Nemo, I guess? So having it centered around Dory is a neat idea. There's a lot of emotional moments in it again. But some people say this didn't need to exist. You have Cars 3 from 2017, which is much better than Cars 2, I'll give it that, but did we need a Cars 3? This should have been Cars 2, but again, did it need to exist? Debatable. Back to some original work, though, we have Coco, which is a wonderful film. It deals with the concept of death and remembrance very well, especially for a younger audience. More people need to show this one some love, honestly. It's just such a heartwarming film that you will enjoy again and again. Sequel time with The Incredibles 2. From 2018. It was a fine sequel, wasn't it? You know, it wasn't a bad film, but The Incredibles one just towers above it. Also, with this slipcover, this seems to be really limited here in the UK. I had to get this after ordering it from HMV, getting the wrong slipcover and asking for this one, and they only had a limited stock. So if you've got this, hold on to it. Film 21 is Toy Story 4. Now, again, I watched it in 2019 and I enjoyed it. It was a good movie. Did it need to exist? Not really. I mean, if this never existed, it would have been fine. It doesn't. Some people argue it ruins Toy Story 3's ending, and to some extent it does. But, you know, as a continuation, it was fine. They need to stop now, I think, really. And you have Onward, the most recent film that came out in 2020, and this is great. Their original work to back to full strength. A story about brotherhood, about family. Done really well by Chris Pratt and Tom Holland here. Again, please don't make a sequel, but yeah, go and watch Onward. It's absolutely wonderful to delve into. So we're picking up where we left off, which was round about here, and this is the Disney Time to Believe collection. I think this started in 2017, and basically the premise is they take a bunch of their live-action titles, re-release them with these collectible slipcovers. They're not numbered, but yes, I did manage to collect them. I think I've got every release they have so far, at least to my memory anyway. Starting with, I've got them in date order, so Mary Poppins has to start, classic film from the 60s, wonderful Disney live-action stuff. Then you've got Bedknobs and Broomsticks from the early 70s, and I love this film. Like, it's just a cracking film with Angela Lansbury as the lead. If you haven't seen it, I highly do recommend it to you. Then you've got the original Pete's Dragon, which has a lot of heart to it. It makes a lot of people emotional, a lot of nostalgia for it. Don't worry about the remake, we'll get there. And then you have, from the late 70s, The Black Hole. Now, this was somewhat of a big experiment for Disney at the time, you know, big budget sci-fi film. This is after the wake of Star Wars. It's okay, it's very hit and miss. Speaking of sci-fi, in the 80s you had Tron, the original classic, and this film is more like nostalgia for people. I think, you know, it's quirky for its time. Some bits are a bit dated, but for what they achieved in the early 80s, it's quite remarkable, actually. Then you've got this, Return to Oz from 1985. This is the sort of pseudo-sequel to The Wizard of Oz. I mean, Dorothy's, the actress is younger, and it's very weird, very dark, it's a decent movie, but it's very bizarre. Do you know what I mean? Very bizarre film. Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988. Wonderful cross between live action and animation, and one of the best examples of its kind. You know, many things would imitate it later on, but this is a great one to kick things off with. And then you have The Rocketeer, which I must admit I haven't seen yet, and it seems people either love this film or they hate it. I just want to love these designs on the covers as well. 101 Dalmatians, I love this film. I think I said in the last part that I really enjoyed this more than the animated original from the 60s. I don't know what it is, probably because I grew up with it, but Glenn Close's Cruella de Vil is phenomenal. And what doesn't get talked about often is the sequel, 102 Dalmatians. This film is amazing. I don't know why it doesn't get talked about a lot more. It came out 4 years later, Glenn Close is still Cruella, and it's marvellous, honestly. A lot of fun, this film. Moving on to the Pirates series now, you have Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, the original and probably the best. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, not a lot of people have fond memories of that one. You've got Enchanted, which again was a wonderful film. I remember seeing this when it came out, the whole notion of a cartoon Disney princess coming to the real world. Excellent movie, great soundtrack as well. You've got Alice in Wonderland, the live-action remake from 2010. This one's alright. Yes, it's really dark and quirky, it's Tim Burton for goodness sake, but it, you know, can't beat the original. You got Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, which I must admit I haven't seen yet, but again, people seem to either love this one or hate it, so... You've got Tron Legacy, the sequel, which was, you know, as Tron sequels go, it was decent, but again, the original stands out. You got Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, the fourth movie, which didn't arguably need to be made, you could argue. You've got John Carter, one of the biggest movie flops ever, like Disney lost so much money on this. I haven't watched it yet, but from what I've heard from people who have seen it, it's actually not like the worst film ever made, it's just not very good. Now I've added these three on the end because they didn't fit on the shelf, so I'll do it like this. You've got Oz, The Great and Powerful, which is sort of like the origins of the wizard himself, played by James Franco. It's an okay film, it's not bad, but it didn't need to be made, arguably. You've got The Lone Ranger, which a lot of people didn't like, and I just thought it was a bit of a long movie, went on forever. And then you have Saving Mr. Banks, an excellent film with Emma Thompson and Tom Hanks, about the story of the author of Mary Poppins and Walt Disney's attempts to get it on the screen. It's a very heartwarming film, a very emotional film, but excellent movie to delve into if you haven't seen. Okay, moving on to the next shelf to carry on, we're kicking off with Maleficent. Now, I wasn't really a fan of this movie. I appreciate what it tried to do, but yeah, just one of them for me. You have Into the Woods, which a lot of my friends hyped up because, you know, being an acting student, musical theatre, big thing. A lot of people like the original musical. I thought this was okay. Again, a bit too long, a bit overstayed its welcome. You've got the live-action remake of Cinderella in 2015. Now, I didn't mind this when it came out because I didn't have much of an affinity with the original Cinderella, but, you know, it's got its flaws, but I liked it. Tomorrowland: A World Beyond. I haven't seen this one yet, but a lot of people have mixed feelings on it, it seems. You've got The Jungle Book remake from 2016. Now, technically, yes, this film is wonderful. Like, the CGI used is incredible. Is it better than the original? No. Not, and Christopher Walken singing Ooby Doo. I mean, God, don't want to hear that again. You've got the Alice sequel that arguably no one asked for, Alice Through the Looking Glass. Haven't seen it yet. A lot of people thought this didn't need to exist, and I mean, I even thought that from the trailer, to be honest. You've got the remake to Pete's Dragon, which was a funny one for them to redo. Haven't seen this yet either, but again, from what people say, it was more of like a, it's okay, but I think more people have the affinity for the 70s original. You have the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast. Now, this is one of my favourite Disney films of all time, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And a lot of this I liked. I loved the aesthetic of it, I loved a lot of the acting, but the main thing I didn't like was her, Emma Watson as Belle. I thought it was a complete miscast if she couldn't sing. Like, you could have put anyone in that role and it would have made $1 billion, so yeah, that was the one big letdown for me. It's quite tightly packed. You've got Pirates of the Caribbean, Salazar's Revenge, the fifth one. Yeah, I didn't like this one. Neither did a lot of people. They just need to put that series to bed now, I think. Do you know what I mean? And we have Christopher Robin from 2018. This is a really heartwarming film. It's about, you know, what would happen if Christopher Robin grew up, and it really warms your heart, man. And Ewan McGregor's great, as he is in pretty much everything he's in. Mary Poppins Returns, the sequel. Yeah, this one, it was fun. Do you know what I mean? It was a good time. It wasn't as good as the original, but it had a lot of heart to it, and it had a lot of things that reminded me of the original. So, yeah, it was a decent movie. Now you've got Tim Burton's Dumbo. Now, admittedly, again, I haven't seen this, but I remember this got slated last year. A lot of my friends saw it and were like, this is terrible. It's not really about Dumbo. It's more about the human characters. And, you know, I will watch it eventually, but I'm prepared to be disappointed. Now we have the live-action Aladdin. You know, Will Smith, Genie and all. Again, some people like this, some people didn't. I'm yet to see it yet, but as I said in the last part, Aladdin wasn't one I grew up with massively, so I'm not going to rush to get to this one. What I did see at the time, however, was this, the Lion King remake. Now, oh my god, I hated this movie. It was essentially, you know, a shot-for-shot remake. It didn't do anything wildly new. It was just, disappointment after disappointment, man. If you want to be disappointed by a film, this is the one, by all accounts. So that's all the Disney live-action or Time to Believe stuff. I think that I need to get the second Maleficent film. I don't know if they've released it yet, but we'll have to see. Put us there to give me some more space as we move into this, the Simpsons. The Simpsons collection that I have. So let's get into this. So starting off, we have The Simpsons Complete Series 1 from 1989 and 1990. You know, it's early beginnings, but still a lot of charm in those early episodes. You got the Complete Season 2, which is episodes from 1990 to 91. You got the first Treehouse of Horror on there, for example. You've got Season 3 from 91 to 92. This has the infamous Stark Raving Dad episode that featured Michael Jackson, which I don't know if they've put it on modern box sets or on the streaming services. You got Season 4 from 92 to 93, which has some great episodes on it, like the monorail episode springs to mind. You have Season 5 from 93 to 94. You have Season 6 from 94 to 95. Yes, that's right. The series finale was Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 1, which for anyone who knows is quite a big deal in Simpsons history. So then you have Season 7 from 1995 to 96, starting with the conclusion of Who Shot Mr. Burns. You got Series 8 from 96 to 97, and I think this one has the Frank Grimes episode on it, Homer's Enemy, which is one of my favourite Simpsons episodes that they ever made, quite frankly. You've got Season 9 from 1997 to 1998, which has the 200th episode on it. You have Season 10 from 1998 to 1999, which is often, I think, a point where people say the series stopped being good. You have Season 11 from 1999 to 2000. They changed the cover design on these a lot. You got Season 12 from 2000 to 2001 with Comic Book Guy. You've got Series 13, which was from 2001 to 2002 with good old Ralph Wiggum. You've got Season 14, which is 2002 to 2003 with Kang or Kodos, either or, I suppose. You got Season 15 from 2003 to 2004 with Otto Man. You got Season 16 from 2004 to 2005 with Professor Frink. Liven! You've got Season 17 from 2005 to 2006 with Sideshow Bob. And they started re-releasing them again. They stopped after this for a few years, but you've got Season 18 here from 2006 to 2007 with Fat Tony. And most recently, anyway, you've got Season 19 from 2007 to 2008 with Homer on the front. So there's still a good, 10 plus seasons to be released because there's more than 30 seasons of The Simpsons. Are Fox going to release them? Well, they're under Disney now, so I know they are all on Disney Plus if you want to watch them, but, you know, for those of us who like physical media, it's good to have them this way. Right, and we'll continue on to another long-running comedy series, which, of course, is the South Park series. Now, these, I think I am pretty much up to date. They're a bit more consistent than the Simpsons releases, but, you know, we'll see as we go. So you have Season 1 here, which started in 1997, would you believe? It's such a long time ago. You got the Complete Season 2, which I think is actually the longest season, from 1998. You've got the Complete Season 3 from 1999. You have the Complete Season 4 from 2000. You have the Complete Season 5 from 2001. You have the Complete Season 6 from 2002. Butters is on the front there. You have the Complete Season 7 with this graffiti style from 2003. And for some reason, my copy of Season 7, the text is all backwards, which is very, very annoying. You have the Complete Season 8 from 2004. The Complete Season 9 from 2005. The complete season 10 from 2006, featuring the infamous World of Warcraft episode. Actually, thinking about it, I think I got my dates muddled up, but so I'm going to stop saying dates. But you've got the complete season 11, which has the Guitar Hero episode on it. You've got the complete season 12, the complete season 13, the complete season 14, complete season 15, which I think was the first one I bought new. I think that came out in 2012. The complete season 16. Then you got thinner cases with the complete 17th season, the complete season 18, the complete season 19, complete season 20, complete season 21, complete season 22, and complete season 23, which came out this year, and you can tell because it's got the new BBFC sticker on it. That came out in July. And just to round off, I've got Gavin and Stacey, wonderful BBC comedy show from 2007 to 10, I think it was. I mean, lots of Brits love this show. I do need to get the new Christmas special that came out last year, but I could watch this again and again. Absolute wonderful comedy. Now, just before we close off for this video, I know I didn't really go into detail with much of the South Park or the Simpsons box sets in terms of episodes. Keep in mind, guys, both South Park and The Simpsons have like hundreds and hundreds of episodes to them, and for me to remember details about specific ones, apart from ones that instantly spring to mind, would be nigh on impossible. And also, I haven't watched all of them yet. Like The Simpsons, I think I'm up to... I think I have watched all The Simpsons I've got on DVD. South Park, I know I'm behind. I'm up to season 13, I think. So I've got 10 seasons to watch. And the thing is, I will get to these. They are quite short, but it will take some time. So Down Down Baby is here are all the best picture films. Now you can see I've had to stack these a lot because, I mean, there's nearly 90 films. And these shelves only allow, I think, like 50 per row. So I'm going to have to go through this quite interestingly. As a disclaimer, I own, I think, every film that's won Best Picture bar 2. I'm missing 2. I think one of them is the Broadway Melody of 1930, which is like the second winner ever. I think that's only available on import. And I'm missing Chimeron, which is also an early 30s film that you can only get on import currently. But I think I own everything else. We'll see as we go through. So let's get started with the few down here. I'll have to move those aside. So starting with the first winner ever, that would be Wings, which was released in 1927 but took the awards for the first awards were actually in 1929. I've got this on Blu-ray because the only way to get this on DVD Region 2 is to get either an import or like a knockoff Chinese DVD. It's a Master of Cinema release and lovely poster artwork here. Silent film as well. There you go, first ever Academy Award winner. Okay, 1927 to 28, I stand corrected. So it stars Clara Bow, amongst others, and on the back, I mean, there's so many special features. For a film this old, nearly 100 years old, I've always been looking forward to delve into this. I haven't watched it yet. You'll see with a lot of these films, I haven't actually watched them because there's so much to get through, but yeah, nice to own the very first one. So as I said, no second Broadway Melody because I don't own it, but I do own this, All Quiet on the Western Front, which came out in 1930 and swept Best Picture. Yeah, do you know what? For a 90-year-old film now, this holds up incredibly well. It's a sound film. It's about, you know, nearly 2 hours long or just over. But for a film this old, it has so much emotional impact. I mean, the First World War at that point was only 12 years old, so it had a lot of impact on people, I guess, especially who maybe fought through it. Yeah, really recommend this one. Great war movie, great movie for its age. Check it out. Now you have this one, Grand Hotel, starring Greta Garbo and John Barrymore, Joan Crawford, really big names, really. Won Best Picture for 1932, and I haven't seen it. Now this one, It Happened One Night. This was a 30s. I think this was more of a screwball comedy, but it's got Clark Gable, who was a huge name at the time, and that's light reflecting there. And I also haven't seen this one. Okay, I got the first clump off here, and we have Mutiny on the Bounty from 1935. And again, a lot of these I haven't seen, so I think any I haven't, I am just going to have to breeze by. But I've heard it's a classic film. Clark Gable's in it again. So yeah, this one was hard to find on DVD as well, but I think it's gotten easier. You have The Great Ziegfeld from 1936. Apparently this is a really long movie, and there were debates that this wasn't the best film of the year, but hey, it's here. This one was hard to track down. This is The Life of Emile Zola. Now, this is actually a Region 1 DVD. I found this like randomly in a DVD shop in Manchester, and I was like, I gotta buy this. Because yeah, this is one you can only get on a Region 1 import for some reason, starring Paul Muni. I haven't seen it, but you got to make sure you got a region-free DVD player. Now you got this from 1938, You Can't Take It With You. It's a Frank Capra film, actually, who went on to make It's a Wonderful Life, amongst others, which for some reason didn't win Best Picture. But James Stewart stars in this, you know, later went on to many Hitchcock movies. And these slipcases, for anyone wondering, this is a HMV thing. I think they call it Hollywood Classics, you know, with the lit-up border and stuff, and it's the same on the back. They've carried on the aesthetic there. So, yeah, these are quite prominent for your classic films, so HMV's a good shout. True classic, you have Gone with the Wind from 1939. And this is a big old box set. It won 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, of course, in 1939. And this is the 4-disc collector's edition. I mean, this is absolutely a huge, huge beast with several parts to it and all that sort of stuff. But see, parts 1 and 2 is the movie, because the movie is so damn long. I do need to watch it properly. I've only ever seen snippets, but yeah, you've got to dedicate, like, you know, several hours of your time. Now, something from Alfred Hitchcock. We have Rebecca from 1940. Yes, Alfred Hitchcock did win Best Picture one year, believe it or not. And I haven't seen it, but I do like my Alfred Hitchcock stuff, so I'm very excited to watch this one. And aren't they they're either remaking Rebecca or they're making a TV series, something like that. You have Mrs. Miniver from 1941, Walter Pidgeon, he's a pretty big name. You have How Green Was My Valley from 1942, again starring Walter Pidgeon, so he would have been pleased. Okay, from 1943 you have Casablanca, which is known as one of the greatest films of all time, you know, Humphrey Bogart's in it. And it has lots of famous lines in it too, and I haven't seen it. There you go, from 1944 you've got Going My Way with Bing Crosby, more of an uplifting film by the looks of it. You have The Lost Weekend, which as you can see in the top right, I got an Oxfam for £1.99, so quite cheap. Stars Ray Milland and Jane Wyman. You have The Best Years of Our Lives, which as it rightly says is only exclusive to HMV, that cover is anyway. This was a hard DVD to track down region 2, but thankfully HMV put this out as part of their Hollywood Classics series, and it just helped me get it, basically. From 1947, you have Gentleman's Agreement, which stars Gregory Peck, who would later go on to star in To Kill a Mockingbird, another HMV release. Now, here's an interesting one. From 1948, you had Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, but starring, world-renowned actor Laurence Olivier. From 1949, you have All the King's Men, which, funnily enough, it won't focus on the side, but there it says, can be played on PlayStation 2. That's how old this DVD is. 1950, you have All About Eve, starring the very famous Bette Davis. And starring the equally famous Gene Kelly in 1951, you had An American in Paris. Continuing in the 50s, you had from 1952 The Greatest Show on Earth, starring, James Stewart's in it, Charlton Heston as well. In 1953, you had From Here to Eternity, which had Burt Lancaster and Frank Sinatra in it, amongst others. 1954 was On the Waterfront, starring Marlon Brando. 1955 was Marty. 1956 was a true classic, as it was Around the World in 80 Days. 1957 was The Bridge Over the River Kwai, starring William Holden and Alec Guinness in one of his most famous roles. From 1958 you have Gigi, the musical, and for some reason this was really hard to track down on Region 2. It can be done, but it just seems a bit difficult. 1959 you had The Beast That Was Ben-Hur, the religious epic. Now, I'm not religious, but I remember we watched this in school over several weeks, and I really enjoyed it as a story. It's a 4-disc collector's edition, like Gone with the Wind. And funnily enough, this actually has the silent version of Ben-Hur, I think. The 1923? Yes, the 1925 silent version, which I think is a really cool special feature. I love it when they do that. But this also holds the record with 2 other movies for having the most Oscars won. This one, 11 Oscars. Can you guess the other 2 before we get to them? Now we have The Apartment from 1960, starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, and Fred McRory. 1961, you have the classic West Side Story, obviously famous musical. I have seen this one, and it's wonderful. Won 10 Academy Awards, would you believe? You have the classic Lawrence of Arabia, another religious epic. Haven't seen this one yet, but it won 7 Academy Awards in 1962. 1963, you had Tom Jones, which is a funny old film. This, again, was so difficult to find on DVD for some reason in Region 2, but alas, we got it. You have My Fair Lady from 1964, and for some reason for ages this was hard to find Region 2, but HMV have done one of their re-releases. But yeah, Audrey Hepburn and Rex Harrison. 1965, you have the beloved The Sound of Music. I don't think there's a soul alive who doesn't like this film. It's very long, but you know, it won it for a reason. Haven't seen this yet, but there is A Man for All Seasons starring Paul Scofield, and this one in 1966. And in 1967, you have In the Heat of the Night. You already saw this as part of the other shelf in a Sidney Poitier box set, but it's a really great film with him and Rod Steiger. Just honestly, watch it if you haven't seen it. Okay, so now moving on to the stuff that I can stack on the shelf. From 1968, you have Oliver. Yes, the musical Oliver won Best Picture, would you believe? I was always surprised by this, but hey, you know, if people liked it, they liked it. Rounding off the 60s, you have Midnight Cowboy, starring Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight. I haven't seen this one yet, but an 18 film, you know, winning Best Picture. Wouldn't be the first time, wouldn't be the last. 1970, you had Patton, starring George C. Scott in what a lot of people consider his definitive role. 1971, you have The French Connection. This is a very budget DVD release. There are much better releases to get at this, but it stars Gene Hackman. One of the most iconic films of all time, The Godfather. Winner of Best Picture, of course. I mean, what is there to say about The Godfather? It's so iconic. Everyone knows it. 1973, you had this. You had The Sting, which won 7 awards according to the box. And I haven't seen it yet, but it's got Robert Redford and Paul Newman, 2 actors I do like a lot. And would you believe it? Godfather Part 2 won Best Picture in 1974. I got this from CEX, clearly. But yeah, I think it's the first and only time a sequel has won Best Picture as well, but I mean, it is such a good sequel. So good. 1975, you have One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson. I mean, what is there to say? It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. Very harrowing in places, but an absolute must-watch. 1976, you had Rocky. That's right, for anyone who didn't know, Rocky won Best Picture. And I can see why with the first one. Like, the first one is a great movie. The sequels all sort of go downhill a little bit, but that first one, really great. Really great stuff. 1977, you have Annie Hall, starring Woody Allen, a somewhat controversial figure in this industry. I haven't seen Annie Hall yet. A lot of his films were seen as quite abstract, but I've heard it's meant to be somewhat decent. 1978, you had The Deer Hunter, starring Robert De Niro. This is a 2-disc special edition, and Robert De Niro is a great actor. I do need to get round to this one, though. 1979, rounding off the 70s, you have Kramer vs. Kramer, starring Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep, and that is not the first nor last time you will see both of those on here. I mean, look, it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, Best Screenplay Adapted. It swept the board, man. 1980, you have this, Ordinary People. I haven't seen it. This was hard to get on Region 2 for quite a while, so yeah, keep your eyes peeled if you want that one. 1981, you have Chariots of Fire. Classic soundtrack. I need to watch the movie still, but yeah, you'll know the soundtrack. That looks like a really bad CGI torch on there. 1982, you had Gandhi, starring Ben Kingsley as the titular figure. A film by Richard Attenborough as well, won 8 Academy Awards. I haven't seen this yet, but I know it's a very, very long film. Moving on to 1983, you have Terms of Endearment, starring Deborah Winger, Shirley MacLaine and Jack Nicholson, of all people. I haven't seen this. It looks like a typical 80s movie, but I do need to get around to it. 1984, you had Amadeus, Amadeus, inspiring the Falco song the next year about Mozart. I haven't seen this, but apparently, again, a lot of people loved it at the time, which is good. 1985, you have Out of Africa, starring Robert Redford and Meryl Streep, 2 people who are no strangers to receiving Oscars at this point. 1986, it's back to war movies. You have Platoon, which is, yeah, to be honest, it is one of the great war movies. I mean, I've seen it. It's wonderful. And obviously a very harrowing soundtrack. Great use of a digio for strings, if memory serves. 1987, you had The Last Emperor, which I haven't seen, but it won 9 Academy Awards, so it must have been, you know, quite heralded at the time. And I know it's a long film, but I need to get to that. Well, I have seen this one. This is Rain Man from 1988 with Dustin Hoffman, again, and Tom Cruise. Yeah, just a really great film, and it's hard to explain it, but I'd say watch it. Very harrowing in places, but a very important film, and I'm glad it won Best Picture. Moving on to 1989, I've seen this as well. This is Driving Miss Daisy, starring Morgan Freeman, Jessica Tandy, and Dan Aykroyd. And Jessica Tandy won Best Actress. I think she's the oldest to win Best Actress. Very simple film, but, you know, I can see why it won Best Picture. In 1990, you had Dances with Wolves, featuring Kevin Costner. This is a long-ass movie. I haven't seen it all the way through yet, but I do need to. I mean, won Best Picture. So 1991, you had The Silence of the Lambs, which was a bit of a surprise winner for Best Picture. I don't think a lot of people expected a pseudo-horror film to win, but I'm glad it did. It's a wonderful and wonderfully creepy film. You have Unforgiven from 1992. I haven't seen this, but it's a Western. I think a Western hasn't won it for a very long time. You got lots of big names: Clint Eastwood, Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Richard Harris. What's not to love about that cast? 1993, you have a really harrowing film. This is Schindler's List. Yeah, if you haven't seen this, if you're like upset easily, this might be one to avoid, but it's a very great film, very powerful film as well. 1994, you have, of course, Forrest Gump featuring Tom Hanks. A wonderful film. Tom Hanks smashes it out of the park like he always does. Yeah, just watch it if you haven't seen Forrest Gump. 1995, you have the historically questionable Braveheart, starring Mel Gibson of all people, a Australian as a Scotsman. Who would have thunk it? It's a decent film, though. I enjoyed watching it. Very long, maybe a bit too long, but a decent movie nonetheless. 1996, you have The English Patient, starring Ray Fiennes, amongst other people, Willem Dafoe. Haven't seen this one, but it was the best picture of the year I was born, so it must be good, right? I mean, it won 9 of them, it says, so it must mean something. 1997, you have the Titanic movie, and if you hadn't guessed it already, this is one of the 3 films that tied with Ben-Hur, not Gone with the Wind, for most Oscars won. This won 11 Oscars at the time, including Best Picture. The film's too long, it's not perfect, the first hour pretty much bores me, but, you know, for what it is, I can see why it won Best Picture. I think, well, we all can see why it won, don't we? 1998, you have Shakespeare in Love, which was a surprising win, I think, but it won 7 Academy Awards. It's got Gwyneth Paltrow, Joseph Fiennes, Geoffrey Rush, Colin Firth, Ben Affleck, and Judi Dench. Big names in there, so yeah, got that one. 1999, you have American Beauty, starring Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening. I haven't seen this one yet. Kevin Spacey's a somewhat controversial figure now, but a lot of people like it, or some people don't get it. 2000, you had, flip it the right way, you had Gladiator, starring Russell Crowe. Haven't seen this one either, but apparently it's quite a long film. It's a Ridley Scott film. It won 5 Academy Awards. Reminds me of all the, religious-y epics as well. Russell Crowe made a comeback in 2001 as he wins again with A Beautiful Mind, which won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, about a mathematician. I haven't seen this one yet, but I think I'll be interested to. 2002, you had Chicago. Again, a surprising win, a musical win, the first time in forever. Won 6 Academy Awards. It's got Catherine Zeta-Jones, Richard Gere, Renee Zellweger. Again, a lot of big names, but I'm just amazed that, a musical won for the first time in so long. Okay, 2003, you had Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, the third part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and this is the third film that won 11 Oscars, quite rightly so. I have seen it. I don't own the first 2 parts of Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, I think, is overrated. I think it's a great franchise, don't get me wrong, but I've just never been that into it. But, I'm glad to have the extended box set version here. 2004, you have $1 Million Baby, which I think it's a film about boxing. I haven't watched it yet, but it's got Clint Eastwood, Morgan Freeman, Hilary Swank, a lot of recognisable names. 2005, you have Crash, which some people cite as the worst Oscar winner film ever, but it's by the same writer of $1 Million Baby. Again, a lot of big names in it, but I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of people say it's bad. 2006, you had The Departed, which has Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Mark Wahlberg. Again, a lot of recognisable names in there. Haven't seen it yet either. Honestly, guys, there's so many films I need to watch, including this one, No Country for Old Men, which won it in 2007, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Javier Bardem, and Josh Brolin. Apparently it's good. Some people don't say it is. I have seen this, though. One of my favourite films ever is Slumdog Millionaire. The story of course, the Indian lad who went on the Indian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and won it big. Great feel-good film. Watch it, watch it, watch it. You will not be disappointed by this one, that's a promise. 2009, you have The Hurt Locker, which is meant to be a very powerful film. I haven't seen it yet, but it stars, who is it? It's Jeremy Renner as the main part. I have seen this, 2010's The King's Speech. Very, again, a powerful film. We all love the British, apparently, starring Colin Firth and Geoffrey Rush. It won 4 Academy Awards and 7 BAFTAs, because, of course it would. 2011, you had The Artist, a silent film, and I'm really glad this won. A lot of people don't like it, but I really like the silent style and how it tried to evoke that era. I mean, it won 7 BAFTAs and 5 Oscars, so yeah, I'm all for the fact that The Artist swept the board that year, as it were. 2012, you had Argo, starring Ben Affleck. Haven't seen this film, but a lot of people, especially at the time, said it was, absolutely wonderful, one of the best films ever, so I do need to check it out at some point. Poor Affleck. 2013, you had 12 Years a Slave, featuring Chetwell Ejiofor. Again, very powerful film about slavery. Probably one of the more accurate portrayals about slavery. It's very real. It's very on the nose. So again, if you're upset easily, you might not want to watch it, but I'd say you should watch it. It's very important. 2014, you had Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, starring Michael Keaton as the lead. A very bizarre film. I think that was what it was going for. It's very very abstract, but I'm glad that abstract films can still win at the Oscars, as this one did. 2015 was Spotlight, and this is a very great film, you know, about journalism and how I guess it can be used for good in this sense. Michael Keaton's in it again as well. I'd say it's a very safe choice for the Oscars, you know, it's very, I mean, it only won Best Picture, but I mean, it won nonetheless. Now, in 2016, From Spotlight to Moonlight. This film's an odd one because a lot of people loved it, and it's a very interesting film. I'd argue it shouldn't have won Best Picture, but look at all those 5-star reviews, so I think you need to watch it and make your own mind up. 2017, you had The Shape of Water, which I'm glad won because not a lot of people expected it to. It's more of like a sci-fi fantasy thing. Really great film, though. Now, from abstract to probably the safest of safe, Green Book for 2018's award. Yeah, this was safe. Good film, very good film, but a very safe choice. The taker for the 2019 was Parasite, and I'm glad it did. This is a wonderful, wonderful film. South Korean film as well, first foreign film to win Best Picture. And yeah, if you haven't seen Parasite, it's got subtitles, but you honestly forget that they're there. They're not that important. So yeah, check out Parasite. So some people might remember this, the Godzilla set. This came out recently. It's the first 15 Godzilla films, part of the Showa era from 1954 to 1975, and it's a wonderful set, you know, really lavishly produced. And I actually did a full unboxing video of it a few months ago, which I'll leave a card in the description. You can check that out. Now, this beast, Gamera. Now, I also did a video on Gamera as a series, but I had a Region 1 DVD back then. This is actually a Region 2 release from Arrow Video. It's a huge chunky box set. It's got all the Gamera films, lots of special features. I'm sort of partway through it, and I might do a full unboxing of this if people want to see it, because it's a huge set to get through. So yeah, nice to have two of the titans of the like Japanese kaiju style, because I love that sort of stuff. And I mean, Gamera, these films are from 1965 to, well, all the way up until 2006, but there's only 12 of them, but a really cool box set to have nonetheless. Now, over here, we've got some Blu-rays and some Blu-ray steelbooks. The first of them is this, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, a film from 2000. Now, a lot of people hated this movie. They're trying to do like a Roger Rabbit style of the old Rocky and Bullwinkle franchise, which was a thing in the 60s. It has its flaws, but I think it's really, if you get into the silliness of it, it is really funny. It's very stupid, and yeah, I just love the fact I've got it on Blu-ray. Now, some of my favourite movies. Here we have the Before trilogy, films by Richard Linklater. And so you have Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. All of them came out 9 years apart, and it has the same actors, you know, 9 years on. And they're just really wonderful films, like about this relationship, about these two people. And I don't want to say more because I don't want to spoil it, but if you love cinema, please go and watch the Before trilogy. It's a really beautiful, beautiful series. And now you have Breathe, which is a film with Andrew Garfield and Claire Foy, and this packed a wallop. I mean, it's based on a true story of a young man who ends up, you know, paralyzed, but then the stuff he achieves despite his disabilities, if you like. Very powerful film, very heartfelt. I highly recommend it, but it probably will make you cry. Sci-fi classics now, we have The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. I had this as part of a DVD box set as well, but I mean, to have it on a Blu-ray steelbook like this, absolutely incredible. Great artwork as well. We also have this, we have Filth, which is an Irving Welsh film. The little title thing is being left behind there. Yeah, if you like Trainspotting, you'll like this. James McAvoy's brilliant. It's a brilliant film in itself, but very messed up, not for the faint of heart, I'll say that much. Now we've got the Florida Project, which I did want to see when it was first out in the cinema. I never got the chance to. It's about like those, you know, discount hotels near Disneyland and the sort of people who have to live around there. And all those 5-star reviews are definitely earned, in my opinion. Really wonderful movie. More steals now. We have The Fly, the original 1958 masterpiece. Again, this was part of that 20th century box set, but to have it on Blu-ray steelbook like this, that's some great cover art. Quite unnerving, if you ask me, actually. One of my favourite comedies, Hot Tub Time Machine from 2010. I'm amazed this had a steelbook release at all. The sequel's awful, but honestly, like, I will defend this first film. Really funny, really, like, heartwarmingly fun. Yeah, check out that first one if you haven't seen it. Also on steel, you have The Jazz Singer, which was the first film, the first talkie from 1927. Very important film, very dated in many ways, but again, cool to own it on a Blu-ray steelbook. Now we have this one, Juno, from 2007, which I never saw at the time, sort of about a girl who's going under teenage pregnancy. I'd argue bits of it have aged poorly in the last 13 years, but as a film itself, it holds up really, really well, so check out Juno. We've also got the first Kick-Ass film. I did like the second one, but the first one, when that came out, man, I thought it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen in my life, and I'm glad I own this on Blu-ray steel. You have the Lego Movie, which is brilliant. I haven't seen the second part yet, but the first film is so brilliant. Such a clever concept, very simple concept, but it is just absolutely wonderful to have the special Blu-ray Steelbook set. So check out the first Lego Movie if you haven't seen it as well. You have Money Monster, starring George Clooney and Julia Roberts. A lot of people were mixed on this film. I quite liked it. It was only cheap to get on Blu-ray Steel as well. You have Mothra, the original Mothra from 1961. This is a Region 1 import, actually, but it played fine on my device. Yeah, the original Mothra, it's alright. Maybe not as fast-paced as some of the other films of the era for kaiju stuff, but nice to have, nonetheless. And I also have the Rebirth of Mothra, 1, 2, and 3. These were the 3 90s Mothra films. Again, it's a Region 1 import, so you've got to make sure you have the right machine. But really cool to own some Mothra alongside Godzilla and Gamera. You have, what's that, My Week with Marilyn, starring Michelle Williams and Eddie Redmayne and Kenneth Branagh. Basically about when Marilyn Monroe came over to England to film with Laurence Olivier, and how this guy got intertwined with her. It's quite a fun little film. Nice to have. Now I got some Pet Shop Boys, one of my favourites, of course. This is Inner Sanctum. This is a recording of their 2017 concerts at the Royal Albert Hall, which are incredible. Their visual spectacle, their sound is wonderful. And did you know they had a film? This is It Couldn't Happen Here, which was originally released in 1988, available only on VHS for the longest time, and then finally they decided to put it out onto Blu-ray. It's a BFI release, and I'm glad it's here because I need to watch this again in high definition. You got Speed Racer. This one was like 50p, and I do want to watch this again. I did see it at the cinema when I was like 10 or 12, and I liked it, and I want to see if I'm going to like it again, so that's why I have that. And then finishing off the steals, we have one of my favourite films, as you'll remember from a previous DVD part. It's The Terminator, the first one. Anyway, I do want to try and get the second one on a Blu-ray Steelbook as well, as that is my favourite movie ever. But alas, I don't have it yet, and they're going to fall. They're a bit precarious, as you can see. I'm desperately running out of space to put things, but that is my small collection of Blu-rays / steals that I've seen so far, including the mammoth sets of Gamera and Godzilla as well. I suppose just to round off, this technically counts. This is the Doctor Who shelf, I'm sure as many of you know. Behind the steelbooks is all the classic series of Doctor Who, including some of the Blu-ray sets there as well. I've got the animated stories that have steelbooks, or as many as I can at least. So I've got Power of the Daleks, Macroterra, Faceless Ones, and Fury from the Deep. Got a lot of Daleks there. Got the new series on steelbook, series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They've just, at the time I'm recording this, they just announced season 7, which I've pre-ordered. And I got season 10 as well. There is a season 9 steel, though it's very expensive. I hope they re-release it. Got more of the Blu-ray sets there, some of the spin-off stuff. You got series 11 and series 12 of the new series as well. So that's the Doctor Who shelf. I've got a ton of Doctor Who VHS up there. And now this is a very interesting, this is like the last little bit. These are DVDs I haven't yet watched. And the thing is, they're doubled up, so there's more DVDs behind this row. I'm not going to get them all out because that would take, well, quite literally forever. But let's just see what we can see. So I've got a few DVD steals I haven't looked at, like Greatest Ever Gangsters, romantic comedies. Or Get Carter, The Great Escape. Yes, I haven't seen that. Some Hitchcock there. Some more modern stuff like If Beale Street Could Talk. Got Last Action Hero, The Lives of Others, Lord of the Flies. It really puts into perspective how much I just haven't gotten around to seeing it. There's only so much time in my day. You know, you got Twins and White Heat and The Wrong Man. There's some Blu-rays over here, like Ghostbusters, for example. Yeah, I've got Good Omens, the TV series on Steelbook. I need to see that. I've got The Last House on the Left. I need to see the Wes Anderson film. American Hustle, Hateful Eight, Irving Welsh's Ecstasy, and some more DVDs behind there. So there's really, you know, there's a fair amount I haven't watched, but that is partly why I don't put them on the shelves. I want to keep separate what I have and haven't watched. But that really, that last little bit closes off what I own on DVD, and I guess by some extension, Blu-ray. But yes, I hope you've enjoyed this video looking at the final remnants of my DVD collection. It's been a mammoth ride, starting all the way over there and finishing here. But if you enjoyed it, please leave a like on this video. Let me know in the comments, do you like what you see here? Do you think there's some movies over there that I need to get around to ASAP? As I said, guys, I hope you've really enjoyed the DVD collection, starting off with this big old shelf. It's been a mammoth series, but I really hope it's something you've been into. And I might do regular collection updates if I get anything substantial. But that is all for now. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next one, I will see you guys next time. A massive thank you to our producer and director patrons for your support towards us here at AMTV. You just help keep us going, and that's massively appreciated. And that does bring us to the end of another evening here on AMTV. We hope you enjoyed the programme, and we hope to see you next time. Good night.